Struggling single dad found a wallet with $10,000. The owner's response made headlines worldwide. Because the moment he returned it, a hidden truth exploded into the spotlight, revealing a twist so shocking it turned one broke father into the center of a worldwide miracle. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The pale light of dawn crept through the worn curtains of Caleb Morris's small bedroom. His alarm hadn't gone off yet, but years of early mornings had trained his body to wake before the sun. He rubbed his tired eyes and swung his legs over the side of the bed, careful to avoid the squeaky floorboard that might wake Lily in the next room. The kitchen was tiny, barely enough room for the ancient refrigerator and a small table with two mismatched chairs. Caleb opened the fridge, its yellow light illuminating the sparse contents inside. There was just enough milk left for Lily's cereal, and he'd make sure she got the last egg. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. "What kind of pancakes should we pretend we're having today?" he whispered to himself, a morning ritual that helped him keep smiling. It was their little game, imagining elaborate breakfasts while making do with what they had. Today would be blueberry pancakes with whipped cream, even though it was really going to be the last of the Cheerios. The coffee maker sputtered and dripped, filling the kitchen with its warm aroma. At least he could still afford coffee, the cheap kind, but it helped him stay alert through long days of working under cars. Caleb leaned against the counter, calculating numbers in his head. The rent was due next week, and with his hours cut at Wilson's garage, things were getting tighter than ever. "Daddy?" Lily's voice made him straighten up, pushing away his worried thoughts. "Morning, sunshine." He turned with a smile that came naturally whenever he saw his daughter. She stood in her faded pajamas, her dark hair tousled from sleep, looking so much like her mother it made his heart ache. "Can you braid my hair today?" She climbed onto one of the chairs, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Sure can." Caleb poured her cereal first, then began working on her hair. His large mechanic's hands had learned to be gentle, mastering the art of braiding through countless YouTube videos after Sarah passed away. "Not too tight? Perfect," Lily said, spooning cereal into her mouth. Jessica at school said, "I'm lucky because my dad can braid better than her mom." Pride warmed his chest, even as he noticed the worn strap of her backpack hanging on the kitchen hook. The seam was splitting wider each day, and he knew it wouldn't last much longer. "Hey, about that new backpack I promised." "I know, Daddy. Soon." Lily's voice held no disappointment, and somehow that made it worse. She was learning to expect less, to be content with waiting, and it broke his heart. After finishing her hair, Caleb watched her eat while sipping his coffee, pretending he wasn't hungry. "Got your homework all done?" "Uh-huh. We're learning about ecosystems. Did you know that everything in nature helps everything else? Like, even when leaves fall and rot, they make the soil better for new plants. Is that right?" He smiled at her enthusiasm, even as his mind wandered to his upcoming shift. His boss, Mike Wilson, was a fair man, but business had been slow. The cut in hours wasn't personal, but it still hurt. They walked to school together, Lily chattering about her science project while Caleb held her small hand in his. The morning air was heavy with Charleston's familiar humidity, promising another hot day. Other parents drove past in newer cars, heading to office jobs in pressed clothes. Caleb adjusted his worn work shirt, pushing away the familiar sting of inadequacy. "Have a great day, sweetie." He knelt to hug her at the school gates, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, the special kind. She loved that he bought, even when they couldn't afford it. "You too, Daddy. Fixed lots of cars." She gave him a bright smile and skipped away, her too small backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Caleb watched until she disappeared inside, then checked his watch. He had 20 minutes to walk, the 15 blocks to Wilson's garage. His old truck had finally given up last month, and bus fare was a luxury he couldn't justify anymore. The garage was already buzzing when he arrived, the sound of air tools and clanking metal filling the air. Mike Wilson looked up from some paperwork, his expression apologetic. "Morning, Caleb. Listen, about today." Caleb's heart sank, but he kept his face neutral. "More cuts? Just for today. We've only got 2 oil changes scheduled." Mike ran a hand through his graying hair. "I'll try to give you first call when things pick up." "I understand." Caleb nodded, even as his mind raced through calculations. Another short day meant another short paycheck. He headed to his locker, changed into his work coveralls, and tried to focus on being grateful for whatever work he could get. The day crawled by slowly, each hour feeling like 2. When his shift ended early at 3, Caleb walked home to save time before picking up Lily. The duplex was quiet and hot. He kept the air conditioning off during the day to save on electricity. In the kitchen, he opened cupboards, taking inventory of their supplies. Half a box of pasta, some canned vegetables, bread that was going stale. He could make it work. After picking up Lily from school, they spent the evening at their small kitchen table. She did her homework while he prepared dinner, stretching the pasta with extra sauce to make it seem like more. The sauce came from the food bank, but he'd told Lily it was a special recipe he'd found. "Aren't you having any, Daddy?" Lily asked as he set a plate in front of her. "I had a big lunch at work." He lied smoothly, hating himself for it. "You go ahead, sweetheart." While she ate, Caleb sat in the living room, pretending to read but actually counting the coins in an old mason jar. He'd been saving for months, hoping to buy Lily a new backpack, but emergencies kept eating into the fund. The coins clinked quietly as he counted them again, hoping for a different total this time. "Can I help count?" Lily appeared beside him, plate empty. "No need, princess. You go get ready for bed. Want me to read you a story?" She hugged him, her small arms tight around his neck. "You're the best daddy ever," she whispered before heading to brush her teeth. Caleb sat there, holding the jar of coins, his throat tight with emotion. "Things will get better," he promised himself softly, setting the jar aside. "They have to." Through the thin walls, he could hear Lily humming while she got ready for bed, the same lullaby Sarah used to sing to her. He closed his eyes, remembering his wife's smile, her unwavering faith that everything would work out. "I'm trying, Sarah," he whispered. "I'm trying so hard." Dark clouds loomed over Charleston, turning the afternoon sky an ominous shade of gray. Caleb Morris trudged along the sidewalk, his shoulders slumped after another disappointing job interview. The position at the warehouse had seemed promising, but they wanted someone with more recent forklift experience. His certification had expired 2 years ago, and the renewal fee wasn't something he could afford right now. The first fat droplets of rain splattered against the concrete. Within seconds, the sky opened up, releasing a deluge that had pedestrians scurrying for cover. Caleb jogged toward the nearest shelter, the striped awning of Thompson's Grocery. Water dripped from his hair and clothes as he joined a handful of other weather refugees beneath the protective overhang. He checked his watch. Lily would be at after-school care for another 2 hours. At least the rain gave him an excuse to rest his feet. The dress shoes he'd worn to the interview, his only pair had begun to split at the sole, and every step reminded him of yet another expense he couldn't handle. Thunder rumbled overhead. Through the curtain of rain, Caleb watched shoppers dash to their cars, pushing carts through growing puddles. An elderly man struggled with his umbrella, which had turned inside out in the wind. Without thinking, Caleb stepped into the rain to help him, getting soaked again in the process. "Thank you, young man," the elderly gentleman said, finally getting his car door open. "Don't catch your death out here." Caleb nodded and made his way back to the awning, but something caught his eye near the cart corral. At first, he thought it was just a piece of trash. There was plenty of that swirling around the parking lot, but the rich brown color and familiar shape made him look twice. It was a wallet. A woman's wallet, expensive-looking leather now thoroughly soaked by the rain. Caleb glanced around. The parking lot was nearly empty now, just a few cars left. The wallet's owner was long gone. He picked it up, feeling the weight of it in his hands. Water dripped from the saturated leather as he opened it. His breath caught in his throat. Inside, secured with a gold money clip, was a thick stack of $100 bills. They were wrapped in neat bundles, each one likely containing thousands. Credit cards filled the slots, platinum, black, the kind Caleb had only seen in advertisements. Behind them, he found a business card, somehow still dry. Marjorie Wynn, Wynn Foundation for Veterans Families. Caleb's hands trembled as he counted the money. $10,000. More money than he'd see in 6 months of work. Enough to pay off their overdue rent. Enough for Lily's new backpack, new shoes, and so much more. Enough to give his daughter the life she deserved. He closed the wallet and shoved it into his jacket pocket. The rain was letting up, but he barely noticed. His mind raced with possibilities and with guilt. The walk home took 20 minutes, each step heavier than the last. In his tiny duplex, Caleb placed the wallet on his kitchen table and stared at it. The leather was beginning to dry, but watermarks remained, like accusations against his conscience. He thought of his mother, who'd raised him alone after his father disappeared. Character? She always said, is what you do when no one's watching. She'd worked 2 jobs, never took a penny that wasn't hers, and still found time to read him bedtime stories every night. What would Lily think if she knew her father had kept someone else's money? How could he teach her about honesty while living with this theft? But was it really theft? The wallet had been abandoned, probably already written off as lost. The owner, this Marjorie Wynn, clearly had money to spare. Those credit cards probably had limits higher than his annual income. Caleb paced the small kitchen, 6 steps one way, 6 steps back. He picked up the wallet, put it down, picked it up again. The money seemed to burn through the leather, through his fingers, through his resolve. He thought of Lily's face that morning when she'd tried to hide the hole in her sock by pulling it up higher. He thought of the empty kitchen cabinets, the past due notices, the constant worry that gnawed at his stomach worse than the hunger. What's right isn't always what's easy, his mother used to say. The memory of her voice, clear as a bell, made his decision for him. With shaking hands, Caleb picked up his phone and dialed the non-emergency police number. Each ring seemed to last an eternity. Charleston Police Department, how can I help you? I'd like to report a found wallet, Caleb said, his voice steadier than he felt, in the Thompson's grocery parking lot on King Street. Can you bring it to the station? Yes, I can do that. He paused. There's a significant amount of cash inside. And credit cards. The owner's name is Marjorie Wynn. He wrote a brief note to include with the wallet. Found in Thompson's grocery parking lot during the rainstorm. Hope everything is intact. Caleb Morris. He added his phone number, though he doubted someone like Marjorie Wynn would bother to contact him. The police station was a 30-minute walk in his wet shoes. Each step squeaked, reminding him of all the things that money could have fixed. But with each step, the weight in his chest lightened just a little. The desk sergeant accepted the wallet, counted the money, and gave him a receipt. Not everyone would have turned this in, she said, looking at him with respect. Caleb managed a small smile. My daughter's 10, he said. I'm trying to teach her about doing the right thing. Wouldn't be much of a lesson if I didn't do it myself. Outside the station, the sun had broken through the clouds, turning puddles into mirrors that reflected the clearing sky. His shoes were still wet, his wallet still empty, but his conscience was clear. He had just enough time to pick up Lily from after-school care. The whine of power tools filled the garage as Caleb worked underneath a beat-up Chevrolet. Grease stained his coveralls, and sweat beaded on his forehead in the stuffy workspace. He was so focused on replacing the car's timing belt that he almost missed Tommy, his supervisor, calling his name. Morris! Phone call for you. Tommy's voice carried over the mechanical din. Says it's important. Caleb slid out from under the car, wiping his hands on a shop rag. His stomach tightened. Phone calls during work usually meant trouble, like the school nurse calling about Lily. The office was a cramped space with yellowed walls and the permanent smell of coffee. Tommy handed him the receiver and stepped out, giving him privacy. Hello, this is Caleb Morris speaking. Mr. Morris? A cultured female voice replied. This is Marjorie Wynn. I believe you found my wallet 2 days ago? Caleb's heart skipped a beat. He remembered the name from the business card. Yes, ma'am. I turned it into the police station on Market Street. Indeed you did. Her tone warmed. I'm in Charleston for the week, staying at the Francis Marion Hotel. I was wondering if you might meet me this afternoon. I'd very much like to thank you in person. Oh, that's not necessary, Caleb started. I insist, Mrs. Wynn said firmly but kindly. Would 4 o'clock work for you? In the hotel lounge? Caleb glanced at the clock. His shift ended at 3 and he needed to pick up Lily from her after-school program anyway. Yes, ma'am. That would be fine. Wonderful. And please, bring your daughter Lily. The police mentioned you were a single father. After hanging up, Caleb stood there for a moment, surprised she knew about Lily. He returned to work, his mind wandering to the wallet and its contents. That much cash could have solved so many problems. Paid off their medical bills, bought Lily new clothes, maybe even put a down payment on a small house. But he'd never considered keeping it. His mother had raised him better than that. At 3:30, freshly showered and changed into his best shirt, a plain blue button-down that Sarah had given him 2 Christmases ago, Caleb picked up Lily from the community center. He'd explained they had an important meeting, and she sat quietly in the back seat, her feet swinging. Is it about a job, Daddy? She asked, hope in her voice. No, sweetheart. Remember that wallet I found? The owner wants to thank us. The Francis Marion Hotel stood proud on King Street, its brick facade speaking of old Charleston money and tradition. Caleb felt out of place as they walked through the ornate lobby, his work boots squeaking against the polished floor. Lily's eyes were wide, taking in the crystal chandelier and elegant furnishings. The lounge was softly lit, with plush armchairs arranged in intimate groupings. A woman rose as they entered, tall, silver-haired, and impeccably dressed in a cream-colored suit. Her jewelry was understated but obviously expensive, and her posture spoke of confidence and grace. Despite her obvious wealth, her smile was genuine and warm. "Mr. Morris? I'm Marjorie Wynn." She extended her hand, then looked down at Lily. "And this must be your daughter." "Yes, ma'am." "This is Lily." Caleb placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. "Hi," Lily said shyly, but she met Mrs. Wynn's eyes with a sweet smile. "Please, sit down, Mrs." Wynn gestured to the chairs. A server appeared almost immediately to take their order. Coffee for the adults and hot chocolate for Lily. "Mr. Morris, please, call me Caleb." "Caleb," she corrected with a smile. "I wanted to thank you personally for your honesty. That wallet contained not just money, but irreplaceable family photos and documents. I was distraught when I realized I'd lost it." "Anyone would have done the same," Caleb said quietly. "Mrs.?" Wynn's eyebrows rose slightly. "I'm afraid that's not true. The world could use more people like you." She reached into her handbag and withdrew an envelope. "I'd like you to have this, as a token of my appreciation." Caleb started to protest, but she held up a hand. "Please, I insist. It's $5,000, half of what was in the wallet. And before you refuse, consider it not just for yourself, but for Lily." Caleb looked at his daughter, who was carefully sipping her hot chocolate, leaving a tiny whipped cream mustache on her upper lip. He thought of her worn backpack, the shoes that were getting too small, the field trips he'd had to say no to. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "That's very generous." "Not at all." Mrs. Wynn's eyes crinkled warmly. She turned to Lily. "Your father is a very special person. You know, he did the right thing even when it was difficult." Lily nodded solemnly. "I know, he always does." A hotel staff photographer happened to be documenting an event in the lounge and asked if he could take their picture. Mrs. Wynn agreed readily, drawing Lily and Caleb close. The photographer captured the moment. Mrs. Wynn's elegant smile, Caleb's slightly embarrassed but genuine expression, and Lily beaming between them. Later that evening, Mrs. Wynn shared the photo and story on her social media accounts. "Today, I met a true hero," she wrote. "Not all heroes wear capes. Some wear work boots and have grease under their fingernails. In a world where integrity sometimes seems rare, Caleb Morris reminded me that goodness still exists." The post began to spread, first across Charleston, then beyond. But Caleb didn't know about any of that yet. He was at home with Lily, counting out money for her new backpack, trying to convince himself it was okay to accept help sometimes, especially when it meant he could finally say yes to his daughter's simple wishes. The morning sun had barely risen when Caleb spotted the first news van pulling into the garage's parking lot. He was elbow deep in an oil change when Tommy rushed over, his usually gruff expression replaced with wide-eyed excitement. "Morris, you better clean up. There's reporters out front asking for you." Caleb's stomach dropped. "Reporters? Why?" "That wallet you found? Stories everywhere. That rich lady posted about it online, and now everyone wants to talk to you." Wiping his hands on a shop rag, Caleb peered through the garage's open door. 2 more news vans had arrived, their satellite dishes stretching toward the sky. A small crowd of people with cameras and microphones gathered near the entrance. "I can't just leave work," Caleb protested weakly, but Tommy shook his head. "Are you kidding? This is great publicity for the shop. Take all the time you need. And listen," Tommy scratched his head, looking somewhat embarrassed. "I've been meaning to tell you, we can bump you up to full-time. Shop's been doing better, and, well, you're our best mechanic." Caleb blinked, stunned by the sudden turn of events. "Really? Thank you, Tommy." After washing up in the employee bathroom, Caleb stepped outside. Camera flashes immediately began popping as reporters surged forward. A familiar face emerged from the crowd. Tanya Wells from the local news station he sometimes watched during dinner. "Mr. Morris," she said warmly, extending her hand. "I'm Tanya Wells from Channel 5 News. Would you mind telling us about finding Mrs. Wynn's wallet?" Caleb swallowed hard, his throat dry. It wasn't anything special. Just did what anyone would do." But not everyone would, Tanya pressed gently. $10,000 is a lot of money, especially for a single father working part-time. Caleb shifted uncomfortably. My daughter Lily, I'm trying to teach her about doing what's right. Wouldn't be much of a lesson if I kept something that wasn't mine. The cameras continued rolling as more questions came. Caleb answered honestly, his voice growing steadier as he spoke about Lily, about losing his wife, about struggling to make ends meet, but never losing hope. Something in his simple sincerity seemed to touch the reporters, and their questions became more thoughtful, less invasive. By afternoon, his phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications. The story had spread to national news outlets. Tommy called him into the office to show him a video clip of his interview playing on CNN. Caleb watched, barely recognizing himself on the screen as the caption read, "Single father's honest act touches hearts across America." "Look at this," Tommy said, turning his computer monitor toward Caleb. A local news website had shared a link to a hastily created fundraising page. Small donations were pouring in, $5 here, $20 there, along with messages of support. "Thank you for restoring my faith in humanity. From one single parent to another, you're doing amazing. Your daughter must be so proud." The numbers kept climbing. $500, $1,000, $2,000, $500. Caleb's vision blurred with tears, he quickly blinked away. When he picked up Lily from school, she burst out of the building with unprecedented excitement. "Dad, everyone's talking about you. My teacher showed us the news story in class." Caleb scooped her up in a hug, not caring who saw. "Yeah, it's been a pretty crazy day, sweetheart. Can we celebrate?" Lily asked, her eyes shining. "Maybe with pizza?" For the first time in years, Caleb didn't have to mentally calculate if they could afford it. You know what? Pizza sounds perfect. That evening, they sat on their worn couch, a half-eaten pizza between them. The local news played quietly in the background, showing clips from the day's interviews. Lily curled up against his side, just like she used to do when her mother was alive. "Dad? Mom would be really proud of you." Lily's voice was soft but certain. "Not just for returning the wallet, but for everything. For taking care of me, for working so hard, for never giving up." Caleb's throat tightened. He pulled his daughter closer, kissing the top of her head. "Thank you, sweetie." They stayed like that for a while, father and daughter, their laughter mixing with the quiet murmur of the TV. The weight of constant worry that had lived in Caleb's chest for so long felt lighter somehow. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope, not just for survival, but for something more. The pizza box sat empty on their coffee table, a testament to their small celebration. Outside, the Charleston evening settled into a peaceful quiet, while inside their modest duplex, a father and daughter held on to each other and their newfound hope for the future. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the weathered boards of their tiny duplex's front porch. Lily sat cross-legged on the creaky floor, arranging her collection of painted rocks, while Caleb relaxed in the old wooden chair they'd rescued from a yard sale last summer. The past week's excitement had finally started to settle down. "Dad, look at this one." Lily held up a rock painted like a ladybug. "I think it's my best yet." She scooted backward to show him, and suddenly there was a sharp crack. The floorboard beneath her gave way slightly, creating a small gap. "Careful, sweetheart." Caleb jumped up, heart racing. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Lily said, already peering into the gap with curiosity. "Hey, there's something down there." She reached into the narrow space between the boards. "Lily, wait," Caleb started, worried about splinters or worse, but she had already pulled out something wrapped in what looked like an old handkerchief, stained and dusty with age. "It's like treasure." Lily's eyes sparkled as she carefully unwrapped the bundle. Inside was a worn brown leather wallet, its surface cracked and faded from years of hiding. Caleb knelt beside her, drawn by an odd feeling in his chest. Something about that wallet seemed familiar, though he knew he'd never seen it before. Lily opened it carefully, and several items tumbled out onto her lap. First was a tarnished army badge, its metal dulled by time, but still bearing the distinctive eagle insignia. Next came several folded papers, yellow and brittle at the edges. But it was the black and white photograph that made Caleb's hands start to shake. A young soldier stared back at him from the photograph, dressed in full military uniform. The man's face was so familiar, it hurt. The same strong jaw, the same slight tilt to the smile that Caleb saw every morning in his own mirror. When Lily flipped over the wallet to examine the ID window, Caleb saw the name before she could read it aloud. "Samuel Morris," he whispered, his voice rough. "Morris?" Lily looked up at him, her eyes wide. "But that's our name! Dad, who is he?" Caleb sank back against the porch railing, his legs suddenly weak. That's my father. Your grandfather. The one who went away?" Lily asked softly, scooting closer to him. Caleb nodded, carefully taking the photograph from her hands. He hadn't seen his father's face in 40 years. Not since that morning when 6-year-old Caleb had come downstairs to find his mother crying at the kitchen table. Samuel Morris had walked out during the night, leaving nothing but a short note saying he was sorry. "I didn't know he was in the army," Lily said, examining the badge with gentle fingers. "Neither did I, not really." Caleb picked up one of the letters with trembling hands. "Mom never talked about it much. Just said he served before they met." The porch light clicked on automatically as dust settled around them. Lily leaned against his side, a warm presence that helped steady his racing heart. "Will you tell me about him? The parts you remember?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment, looking at the items spread out before them. Finally, he pulled Lily closer and began to speak, his voice soft with memory. "I remember he used to take me fishing down at the pier every Saturday morning. He'd pack these terrible sandwiches, just butter and cheese, nothing else. But somehow they always tasted amazing out there on the water." Lily smiled, settling in as Caleb continued. He had this deep laugh that seemed to come all the way from his toes. When something really got him going, the whole house would shake with it. And he could fix anything. Cars, toasters, broken toys. His hands were always clean, though, no matter how dirty the job. I never understood how he managed that. "Like you with the cars at the garage," Lily observed, making Caleb pause. He'd never made that connection before. "I suppose so," he said quietly. "He taught me the basics of engines when I was about your age. Said every person should know how their car works, just in case." Caleb picked up another letter, but couldn't bring himself to open it yet. He used to tell the best bedtime stories, not from books. He made them all up. Stories about brave knights and clever foxes, and magical toolboxes that could build anything you dreamed of. "That's where you get it from," Lily exclaimed. "You tell the best stories too." Caleb smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "Maybe, though I haven't told many lately, have I? Will you tell me one now?" Lily asked, picking up the army badge and running her thumb over its surface. Caleb looked at the young soldier in the photograph, trying to reconcile that proud, smiling face with the man who had disappeared into the night 4 decades ago. "How about I tell you about the time your grandfather built a whole playground in our backyard using nothing but spare parts from his workshop?" "Really? He did that?" "He did. It took him 3 weekends, and the slide was made from an old curved piece of metal from a truck bed," Caleb began, the memory becoming clearer as he spoke. "The neighbors thought he was crazy, hauling all that metal into the yard. But by the time he finished, every kid on the block wanted to come play on it." As Caleb shared more stories, the porch grew darker around them, but neither seemed to notice. He told Lily about the treehouse that never quite got finished, the homemade ice cream they'd make in summer, and the way Samuel would whistle while he worked in his shop. Each memory brought others flooding back, things Caleb hadn't thought about in years. "He sounds nice," Lily said finally, stifling a yawn. "Why did he go away?" Caleb looked down at the bundle of letters in his lap, still unopened. "I don't know, sweetheart. I really don't know." The crickets were singing their evening chorus now, and a cool breeze rustled the papers between them. Carefully, they gathered up the wallet and its contents, wrapping them back in the old handkerchief. As they stood to go inside, Lily hugged her father tightly. "I'm glad we found it," she said. "Now we have pieces of him to keep." Caleb held his daughter close, feeling the weight of the wallet in his hand. "Yeah," he said softly. The morning sun barely peeked through the clouds. As Caleb sat in his truck outside the Charleston County Records office, Samuel's worn wallet heavy in his hands. His fingers traced the edges of the leather, smoothing over decades of wear. The building ahead looked imposing, with its brick facade and concrete steps, holding answers he wasn't sure he was ready to face. Taking a deep breath, Caleb grabbed his coffee cup from the holder and stepped out into the crisp morning air. The metal doors creaked as he entered the building, his work boots echoing against the linoleum floors. An elderly clerk looked up from her computer, adjusting her reading glasses. "Can I help you, hon?" Caleb cleared his throat. "Yes, ma'am. I need to look up some military records and maybe a last known address." He placed the wallet on the counter, carefully removing the old military ID. "It's about my father, Samuel Morris." The clerk's fingers flew across the keyboard with surprising speed. "Let's see what we can find." She peered at the ID through her glasses. "You'll need to fill out these forms first," she said, sliding some paperwork across the counter. As Caleb worked through the forms, his hand trembled slightly. He hadn't written his father's name on anything in years. The clerk disappeared into a back room, returning with a thick folder. "Military records are mostly digitized now, but we keep local copies too." She spread out several documents. "Samuel Morris. Yes, here we go. Served from 75 to 83. Discharged." She paused, glancing at Caleb with sympathy, dishonorably. Caleb's jaw tightened. He'd always assumed his father had just walked away, but there was more to the story. The clerk continued searching through newer records. "There's a more recent address here," she said, writing it down on a sticky note. "It's the Harbor Light Shelter, down by the waterfront. Last update was 3 years ago." Caleb stared at the address. The shelter was less than 4 miles from his house. His father had been that close all this time. His heart pounded as he thanked the clerk and headed back to his truck. The drive to the waterfront took him through familiar streets, past the garage where he worked and the grocery store where he'd found Marjorie's wallet. The Harbor Light Shelter sat in an old converted warehouse, its faded blue paint peeling in the salt air. Inside, the shelter was clean but worn, with mismatched furniture and the smell of industrial cleaner. A young woman at the front desk looked up from her paperwork. "Welcome to Harbor Light. I'm Jenny. How can I help you?" Caleb placed the wallet on the counter. "I'm looking for information about someone who might have stayed here. Samuel Morris?" Jenny's expression shifted. "Oh, Sam?" She pressed her lips together. "I'm so sorry, but Sam passed away last winter. Were you a friend?" The words hit Caleb like a physical blow. He gripped the edge of the counter to steady himself. "I'm his son," he managed to say. Jenny's eyes widened. "You're Caleb?" She touched his arm gently. "He talked about you all the time. Wait here. Let me get Marcus. He knew your father better than anyone." Caleb sank into a nearby chair, his legs suddenly weak. A few minutes later, Jenny returned with an older man wearing a maintenance uniform. "You're Sam's boy?" Marcus asked, extending his hand. "He would have been so proud to see you now. I saw you on the news last week. That story about the wallet you found. Sam would have done the exact same thing." Caleb looked up sharply. "You knew him well?" Marcus nodded, pulling up a chair. "Sam was here on and off for years, helped me fix things around the shelter. Never took a dime for his work." He paused, studying Caleb's face. "He kept every newspaper clipping about you and your garage work. Knew all about your little girl, too. But he never," Caleb's voice cracked. "He never tried to contact me. He wanted to," Marcus said softly, "but he felt he didn't deserve to. Said he'd failed you too many times." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn envelope. "He left this for you. Asked me to hold on to it, just in case you ever came looking." With trembling hands, Caleb opened the envelope. Inside was a letter dated just weeks before his father's death. "Dear Caleb, I've written this letter 1,000 times in my head. The words never seem right. How do you apologize for a lifetime of absence? The truth is, I've been right here, watching you grow into the man I never had the courage to be. I was discharged for taking the blame for another soldier's mistake. I couldn't face your mother or you after that shame. Instead of being honest, I ran. It was the worst mistake of my life. But I've seen how you raised Lily on your own, how you never gave up, never ran, even when things were hardest. You became everything I wished I could have been. I'm proud of you, son. I always have been. Love, Dad." Caleb pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes, fighting back tears. His father hadn't abandoned them. He'd punished himself with exile instead. All these years, he'd been close enough to watch his grandson grow up, but too ashamed to reach out. "He came down with pneumonia last December," Marcus explained gently. "Refused to go to the hospital until it was too late. His last words were about you." Caleb looked down at the letter again, at the shaky handwriting that spoke of his father's final days. The anger he'd carried for so long began to shift into something else. A deep, aching sadness for all the years they'd lost. "Did he suffer?" Caleb asked quietly. Marcus shook his head. "He went peacefully. And Caleb, he never stopped hoping you'd find out the truth someday. That's why he left that wallet under your porch board before he got sick. He knew someday you or Lily would find it. Caleb sat back, stunned. His father had been the one to hide the wallet. He'd been close enough to touch their lives, yet remained in the shadows, watching over them from a distance. The revelation settled over him like a heavy blanket, bringing with it a complex mix of grief, understanding, and a strange kind of peace. The small cafe buzzed with mid-morning chatter as Caleb waited at a corner table, Samuel's wallet resting on his lap. His hands fidgeted with a paper napkin, tearing tiny pieces off the edges. Through the window, he watched luxury cars glide past, their drivers oblivious to the weight of history pressing down on his shoulders. Marjorie Wynne entered precisely at 10, dressed in a powder blue cardigan and pearl necklace. Her silver hair caught the sunlight as she made her way to the table. Despite her elegant appearance, her warm smile put Caleb at ease. "Thank you for meeting me," Caleb said, standing to pull out her chair. "Of course, dear." Marjorie settled into her seat. "Your call sounded urgent. Is everything all right?" A waitress appeared with 2 steaming cups of coffee. Caleb waited until she left before speaking. "I found something yesterday." He placed the wallet on the table between them. "It belonged to my father." Marjorie's perfectly shaped eyebrows lifted. "The father you hadn't seen in 40 years? Caleb nodded, his throat tight. "He was living here in Charleston, at a homeless shelter." His voice cracked slightly. "He passed away last year." "Oh, Caleb." Marjorie reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I'm so sorry." With trembling fingers, Caleb opened the wallet and carefully removed the military ID. His name was Samuel Morris. He served in Vietnam. Marjorie's breath caught. Her fingers went to her necklace, touching it like a talisman. "Vietnam," she whispered. Her eyes grew distant, filled with a familiar pain that Caleb recognized all too well. "Did you?" he started to ask. "My son, James." Marjorie's voice was barely audible. "He was just 23 when we lost him. 1969, near Saigon." She touched the ID card gently. "When was your father there?" 68 to 70, according to his records. Caleb watched as Marjorie's eyes welled with tears. Maybe they knew each other. It's possible. She dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. The world can be so small sometimes. 2 soldiers, perhaps crossing paths, and now here we are, their children sitting together. She gave a watery smile. "Though I suppose I'm old enough to be your mother." Caleb shared what he'd learned at the shelter, about how Samuel had lived there off and on for years, how he'd talked about his son. His voice grew hoarse as he described the staff's memories of a quiet man who helped maintain the building and never asked for recognition. "All that time," Caleb said, staring into his coffee, "he was right here, watching from a distance. I don't understand why he never reached out." "Sometimes shame can build walls stronger than prison bars," Marjorie said softly. "Whatever drove him away, perhaps he felt he'd lost the right to return." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, both lost in thoughts of the past. Finally, Marjorie straightened her shoulders. "We should honor him properly." "What do you mean?" "A memorial service. Something small but dignified. Every soldier deserves to be remembered, Caleb, especially those who lost their way after serving." Her eyes sparked with purpose. "Let me help arrange it. It would mean a great deal to me." "I couldn't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering." Her tone was gentle but firm. "Let me do this, please. For Samuel, for James, for all of them." Caleb felt something loosen in his chest, a knot of grief he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. "Thank you." He managed. They spent the next hour planning, Marjorie making notes in a small leather notebook. As they were preparing to leave, she paused. "Have you gone through everything in the wallet?" "Most of it," Caleb said, picking it up. "There are some old photos, his discharge papers." He stopped as his fingers found something in a hidden compartment he hadn't noticed before. Carefully, he pulled out an envelope, yellowed with age, but unopened. His heart stopped when he saw the address written in faded blue ink. Caleb Morris, Charleston, SC. The postmark was from 5 years ago. "A letter?" he whispered, showing it to Marjorie. "For me." She touched his arm gently. "Would you like some privacy?" Caleb shook his head, unable to take his eyes off his father's handwriting. "I don't think I can read it alone." Marjorie remained in her seat, a steady presence as Caleb's fingers hovered over the seal. The cafe's sounds faded away, the clinking cups, the murmured conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine, until all he could hear was his own heartbeat and the whisper of paper as he carefully opened the envelope. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window of their small duplex, casting a warm glow on the worn wooden table where Caleb and Lily sat. The envelope from Samuel's wallet lay between them, yellowed with age and slightly crumpled at the corners. Lily hugged her knees to her chest in her favorite blue pajamas, watching her father with concerned eyes. Caleb's hands trembled as he carefully opened the envelope. The paper was thin, almost delicate, covered in neat handwriting that brought back memories of birthday cards from long ago. He cleared his throat, trying to steady his voice. "Dear Caleb," he began reading, his voice barely above a whisper. "If you're reading this, I'm probably gone. There's so much I need to tell you, son, and I've been a coward for not saying it face to face." Lily reached across the table and squeezed her father's hand. Caleb squeezed back, grateful for her presence. "I've watched you grow from afar," the letter continued. "I saw you graduate high school from the back row. I was there at your wedding, hidden behind the church columns. I even caught glimpses of little Lily playing at the park. Every time, I wanted to step forward, to say something, but shame held me back." Caleb's voice cracked. He paused, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Lily got up and wrapped her arms around his shoulders, just as he had done for her countless times. "The military discharge wasn't what everyone thinks." Samuel's words flowed across the page. "There was an incident in Vietnam. My commanding officer ordered us to leave a wounded soldier behind during a retreat. I couldn't do it. I stayed back, against orders. The wounded man was just a kid, younger than you are now." Hot tears rolled down Caleb's cheeks as he read on. "They court-martialed me for disobedience. I took the dishonorable discharge to protect the others who helped me. The shame of it broke me, son. I couldn't face your mother or you. I convinced myself you were better off without a failed soldier for a father." Lily's grip tightened around her father's shoulders. "Grandpa was a hero," she whispered. "I've lived on Charleston streets all these years," the letter continued. "Sometimes I'd see you working at the garage, and my heart would swell with pride. You became the man I wished I could have been. Strong, honest, devoted to your family. The way you've raised Lily alone. You're twice the father I ever was." Caleb had to stop again, his vision blurring. The morning light caught the dust motes dancing in the air, and for a moment he thought he could feel his father's presence in the room. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, son, but I want you to know that not a day went by when I didn't think of you, when I didn't regret my choices. The medals and honors they took away meant nothing compared to what I lost with you." The letter ended with a simple closing. "I love you, son. I always have." "Dad," Caleb folded the letter carefully, his hands still shaking. He pulled Lily into a tight hug, feeling the warmth of her small body against his chest. They stayed that way for a long time, neither speaking, both processing the weight of Samuel's words. Later that afternoon, Caleb walked into the VA office, the letter tucked safely in his jacket pocket. The building was a stark concrete structure, its halls echoing with footsteps and distant conversations. At the front desk, a young woman directed him to the records department. "I'm here about my father's discharge," Caleb explained to the elderly officer behind the desk. "Samuel Morris, Vietnam era." The officer, Colonel Davidson, according to his nameplate, peered at Caleb over reading glasses. His silver hair and weathered face spoke of decades of service. "Morris?" he repeated, typing on his computer. "Yes, I remember that case." Caleb leaned forward. "You knew about it?" "I was just starting my career when that came across my desk," Davidson said, his voice low and thoughtful. "Let me pull the file." He disappeared into a back room, returning with a thick manila folder. As Davidson flipped through the pages, his expression grew distant. "Your father's official record shows insubordination and failure to follow direct orders," he said carefully. "But sometimes, Mr. Morris, military papers don't tell the whole story." "What do you mean?" Caleb asked, his heart pounding. The colonel glanced around the empty office before continuing. "There were complications with that mission, the wounded soldier your father stayed behind to save. He was the son of a high-ranking official. The official story was crafted to protect certain reputations." Caleb's hands clenched into fists. "So my father took the fall?" Davidson closed the file slowly. "I can't officially comment on that, but I will say this. Some of the bravest acts I've known in my career never made it into any official record. Some men choose honor over glory, Mr. Morris. Your father," he paused, choosing his words carefully, was that kind of man. Caleb sat back, feeling as if the air had been knocked from his lungs. The morning's letter took on new meaning, layers of truth and sacrifice hidden beneath his father's humble words. The shame that had driven Samuel to the streets wasn't his own. He'd carried it to protect others. "Thank you," Caleb managed to say, standing on unsteady legs. "I appreciate your honesty." As he walked out of the VA office, the late afternoon sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Caleb felt the letter in his pocket, heavy with the weight of untold stories and sacrifices. His father, who he'd spent years believing had abandoned them, had instead chosen a path of silent honor. The anger he'd carried for so long began to transform into something else, a deep, aching respect for the man who had watched over him from the shadows, bearing his burden alone. The morning sun filtered through the faded yellow curtains of Caleb's tiny kitchen, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor as he stared at his phone, reading the text from Marjorie for the third time. His coffee had gone cold in the bad. Chip's ceramic mug beside him, completely forgotten in the midst of his racing thoughts that tumbled over each other like autumn leaves in a windstorm. "I've made some inquiries about your father," her message read in crisp, precise letters that seemed to glow on his cracked phone screen. "Someone wants to speak with you. His name is Frank Maddox. He served with Samuel. I believe this conversation could change everything you think you know." Caleb's hands trembled slightly as he dialed the number Marjorie had provided, his thumb hesitating over each digit, as if the simple act of calling might shatter whatever fragile hope had begun to bloom in his chest. After 2 rings that seemed to stretch into eternity, a gruff voice answered, weathered by years and heavy with unspoken stories. "Hello? Mr. Maddox? This is Caleb Morris. Marjorie Wynn gave me your number." The words felt thick and clumsy on his tongue. There was a pause on the other end, filled with the crackle of old phone lines and the weight of decades. When the voice came again, it had transformed completely, roughness melting into something tender and reverent. "Sam's boy?" The voice softened like butter left in warm sunlight. "Dear Lord, I've been waiting 40 years to talk to you, son. 40 long years." They arranged to meet that afternoon at Pine Grove Nursing Home on the outskirts of town. Caleb spent the morning pacing the length of his small apartment, wearing a path in the already threadbare carpet, his mind churning with questions that had no answers and fears that had no names. He'd called in sick to work for the first time in over 2 years, something that would normally have filled him with guilt and worry about lost wages. But this felt too monumentally important to wait for his next day off. The nursing home sat on the quieter outskirts of Charleston, a neat brick building that looked more like a country club than a care facility, surrounded by towering oak trees whose branches swayed gently in the afternoon breeze. Spanish moss hung from their limbs like nature's curtains, filtering the sunlight into dappled patterns on the manicured lawn. Caleb parked his old pickup truck between 2 pristine SUVs that probably cost more than he made in a year, and walked through the automatic glass doors with Samuel's worn wallet heavy in his pocket, a tangible reminder of the mysteries he was about to uncover. The lobby smelled of fresh flowers and industrial-strength cleaning products, a combination that somehow managed to feel both welcoming and sterile. A nurse with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun directed him to the garden courtyard, her voice gentle as she pointed him toward the back of the building where residents often gathered on pleasant afternoons like this one. Frank Maddox sat in a wheelchair near a small fountain, its gentle splash providing a peaceful soundtrack to the afternoon. Despite being confined to the chair, everything about the man spoke of a soldier's bearing. His white hair was neatly combed and parted with military precision, and he wore pressed khakis and a navy polo shirt that looked fresh from the laundry. Despite his age, which Caleb guessed to be somewhere in his 70s, his back was ramrod straight, and his eyes were sharp and alert as they fixed on Caleb with an intensity that spoke of a man who had seen much and forgotten nothing. "You look just like him," Frank said by way of greeting, his voice carrying the weight of memory and recognition. "Same way of walking, head held high, but trying not to draw attention to yourself. Same stubborn set to your jaw when you're thinking hard about something." He gestured to an empty wrought iron chair positioned near his wheelchair. "Sit down, son. We've got a lot to talk about, and I'm not getting any younger." Caleb lowered himself into the chair, its metal warm from the afternoon sun, studying the older man's weathered face that bore the lines and scars of a life fully lived. Deep creases around his eyes spoke of years spent squinting into foreign suns, and a thin scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, a souvenir from some long-ago conflict. "You knew my father well?" Frank nodded slowly, his weathered hands folding carefully in his lap, fingers that had once held rifles now gentle and deliberate. Served together in 68 and 69. Your daddy was my squad leader during some of the worst fighting of the war. He took a deep breath that seemed to draw in 40 years of memories. Son, what they told you about his discharge? It's all wrong. Every single bit of it is a lie designed to protect someone else's reputation. A small sparrow landed near their feet, its tiny claws clicking against the concrete as it pecked at invisible crumbs. Frank watched it for a long moment, as if gathering his thoughts or perhaps his courage, before continuing in a voice that grew stronger with each word. Your father was a genuine hero, Caleb, not the kind they make movies about, but the real kind, the kind who does what's right even when nobody's watching. He saved 5 men's lives during an ambush near Khe Sanh, pulled each one of them out of the kill zone while enemy fire was coming down like rain. Should have gotten a Silver Star for it, maybe even a Distinguished Service Cross, but he never did. Why not? Caleb leaned forward, his heart pounding so hard he could feel his pulse in his temples, because 2 weeks later, he took the fall for another soldier's mistake. Big mistake. The kind that could have ruined multiple lives and ended careers. Frank's voice grew hoarse with emotion, and he paused to clear his throat. There was a young private named Tommy Chen. Good kid, barely 19 years old, fresh-faced and scared out of his mind most of the time. He'd panicked during a night patrol, discharged his weapon when he shouldn't have. There were civilian casualties, a family caught in the crossfire. Caleb felt his throat tighten as if someone had wrapped their hands around his neck. And my father. Sam stepped forward and claimed responsibility, Frank said, his blue eyes growing distant as they fixed on something only he could see. Chin had a baby on the way back home, a young wife who was counting on him coming back in one piece with an honorable discharge. Your father knew that a dishonorable discharge would destroy that family's future. No GI Bill benefits, no veterans' health care, no chance at a decent job when he got home. So Sam stepped up and took the blame, knowing full well what it would cost him. But why? Caleb's voice cracked like a teenager's, raw with pain and confusion. He had a family too. He had me and Mom. Didn't we matter? Frank turned to face him fully, his weathered features soft with compassion and understanding. Of course you mattered, son. You mattered more than anything in the world to him. But they wanted him to testify against Chin, to tell the truth under oath, and send that boy to military prison. Sam refused point blank, said he couldn't live with himself if he ruined that young man's life when he still had a chance to make something good out of it. Frank's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Your father believed in doing what was right, even when it hurt worse than any physical wound, even when it cost him everything he held dear. They gave him the dishonorable discharge, and he accepted it without a word of protest. Carried that shame and that secret for 40 years, never once complaining about the unfairness of it all. Caleb pulled the worn leather wallet from his pocket, his fingers tracing the familiar cracks and creases that mapped a lifetime of use. He could have fought it later, could have appealed the decision, cleared his name when things calmed down. That wasn't Sam's way, Frank said quietly, his voice filled with a respect that transcended the years. He believed a man's word was his bond, and he'd given his word that he was responsible, even when it meant living under a cloud of disgrace for the rest of his life. He reached out with a trembling hand, touching the wallet with the reverence one might show a religious relic. May I look at it? Caleb handed the wallet over without hesitation. Frank handled it like a precious artifact, opening it carefully with fingers that shook slightly from age or emotion. Still has his military ID card, he murmured, his voice thick with memory. You know, son, every time I saw him at the shelter over the years, he'd pull out this little newspaper clipping about you. Could have been from your high school graduation, or when you got married, or when little Lily was born. He kept track of everything good that happened in your life. You saw him at the shelter? Caleb's voice was barely a whisper, each word falling like a stone into still water. You mean he was here, in Charleston, all this time? Once a month for the past 15 years, I'd drive down to the men's shelter and have lunch with him, Frank admitted, his own voice heavy with regret. He was living rough, moving from place to place, but he always came back to Charleston, said he needed to be close to you, even if he couldn't be part of your life. Frank's hands trembled slightly as he returned the wallet, pressing it into Caleb's palm like he was passing along something sacred. I tried to convince him to reach out to you, especially after your wife passed. Told him you needed him, that families should stick together during hard times. But he'd just shake his head and say he didn't deserve to be your father anymore. Said you were better off thinking he was just a coward who ran away than knowing the truth about what kind of man would abandon his family. They sat in silence for several minutes. The only sounds, the gentle splash of the fountain and the distant laughter of other residents enjoying the afternoon sunshine. A mockingbird in one of the oak trees ran through its repertoire of borrowed songs, each melody a small reminder that beauty could exist even in the midst of sorrow. Finally, Caleb found his voice again. I want to hold a memorial service for him, a proper one, with full military honors. I want people to know the truth about who he really was. Frank nodded slowly, a smile creasing his weathered features for the first time since Caleb had arrived. About time someone told the real story. That boy he saved, Tommy Chin. He went on to build a good life, got a successful construction business in Seattle, raised 4 kids, and has 7 grandchildren now. His youngest son just finished medical school and is starting his residency at Seattle Children's Hospital. Frank met Caleb's gaze with eyes that held the weight of truth finally spoken. Your father's sacrifice meant something real, son. Those lives he saved went on to touch hundreds more. Thousands, when you count all the people Tommy's children and grandchildren have helped in their own ways. Sam's one act of selflessness created ripples that are still spreading today. Caleb stood up slowly, his legs unsteady as the full weight of his father's story settled into his bones like winter cold. Thank you, Mr. Maddox. Thank you for telling me the truth. For giving me my father back after all these years. Call me Frank, son. The older man reached out with both hands and grasped Caleb's hand firmly, the grip still strong despite his age. And Caleb, your father never stopped loving you, not for one single day. He just loved you enough to think you deserved better than a disgraced soldier who'd lost everything that mattered. Frank's voice grew soft and distant. He used to say that watching you from afar was both the greatest joy and the greatest pain of his life. Joy because he could see what a good man you'd become, and pain because he knew he hadn't been there to help you become that man. As Caleb walked back to his truck on unsteady legs, the late afternoon sun, painting everything in shades of gold and amber, he pulled out his phone with trembling fingers to call Marjorie. The story of his father's true legacy needed to be told properly, with dignity and honor, and he knew exactly who could help him ensure that Samuel Morris finally received the recognition he had earned but never claimed. The weight in his chest had fundamentally shifted during his conversation with Frank. No longer the crushing burden of abandonment and shame he had carried for so many years, but instead the precious inheritance of sacrifice and honor that his father had unknowingly left him. As he started his truck and began the drive home, Caleb realized that he was no longer the son of a man who had run away from his responsibilities. He was the son of a hero who had loved his family enough to sacrifice his own reputation to protect a stranger's future. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the small gathering at Charleston's Veterans Memorial Park. Metal folding, chairs formed neat rows on the grass, facing a simple wooden podium decorated with a single American flag. Behind it stood a large photograph of Samuel Morris in his military uniform, his young face, serious but kind, mounted on an easel. Caleb's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his tie. Lily, wearing her best blue dress, squeezed his hand and smiled up at him. "It's okay, Dad," she whispered. "Grandpa Samuel would be proud." The crowd was modest but meaningful. A dozen elderly veterans sat in pressed uniforms adorned with medals, their faces weathered but dignified. Marjorie Wynne occupied a front row seat, elegant in a black dress and pearl necklace. A few local reporters stood discreetly to the side, including Tanya Wells from Channel 5, who had covered Caleb's wallet story. Frank Maddox wheeled himself to the podium, his medals gleaming in the afternoon light. His voice, though aged, carried clearly across the gathering. "I served with Samuel Morris in Vietnam," he began, his hands gripping the podium edges. "And for 40 years, I've carried the weight of his story. Today, I finally get to tell the truth about a hero." Frank's eyes grew misty as he recounted that fateful night in 1969. "We were pinned down in the jungle, enemy fire everywhere. Sam," his voice cracked. "Sam ran through open ground 5 times to drag wounded men to safety. 5 times. With bullets whizzing past his head. He saved every one of them." The veterans in attendance nodded solemnly, understanding the magnitude of such courage. Caleb felt his throat tighten as Frank continued. "But that wasn't the end of his sacrifice," Frank said. "Later, when another soldier's mistake nearly cost lives, Samuel took the blame. This soldier had a young family, a sick child. Sam knew a dishonorable discharge would destroy them. Frank paused, his hands shaking. So he sacrificed his own honor to save another family. He never told anyone the truth, not even when it cost him everything, Marjorie dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. The reporters scribbled in their notepads, their faces showing they knew they were witnessing something profound. I should have spoken up years ago, Frank's voice quavered. But Sam made me promise to stay quiet. That was the kind of man he was, always putting others first, even when it broke him. Caleb stood next, his father's letter feeling heavy in his pocket. The podium seemed to loom before him as he unfolded the weathered paper. Lily gave him an encouraging nod. Dear Caleb, he began reading, his voice soft but steady. If you're reading this, I'm probably gone. There's so much I need to tell you, son. The words seemed to float in the autumn air as Caleb read about his father's struggles, his shame, and his silent vigil over his son's life. I watched you graduate high school from across the street, Caleb read, his voice catching. I saw you marry Sarah. I even glimpsed Lily playing in the park once. I wanted so badly to approach you, to explain everything, but I couldn't bear to bring my shame into your life. The letter continued, describing Samuel's years of homelessness, his attempts to rebuild his life, and his pride in watching his son from afar. You became everything I hoped you'd be, Caleb, a good man, a loving father. You broke the cycle I was too weak to break. By now, there wasn't a dry eye in the gathering. Even the veterans wiped tears away unashamedly. Tanya Wells had stopped writing, her pen frozen over her notepad as she listened. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. Caleb read the final lines, his voice barely a whisper. But I want you to know that every day, every single day, I loved you. You were my redemption, son, even if I couldn't be yours. Love, Dad. When Caleb finished, a profound silence fell over the park. The autumn breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the sweet scent of nearby magnolias. After a moment, one of the veterans stood and saluted the photograph. One by one, the others joined him, paying tribute to their fallen brother. Marjorie approached the podium next, her voice clear and determined. Samuel Morris's story reminds us that heroism comes in many forms, she said. Sometimes it's running through gunfire to save lives. Sometimes it's sacrificing everything to protect others. And sometimes, she looked directly at Caleb, it's passing these values down to the next generation. As the ceremony concluded, people lingered to share stories and condolences. The reporters approached respectfully, asking thoughtful questions about Samuel's service and sacrifice. Tanya Wells promised to handle the story with the dignity it deserved. Later that evening, after the cameras had gone and the chairs were cleared away, Caleb and Lily sat on their front porch, the same porch where they'd found Samuel's wallet, hidden all those years beneath the floorboards. Time for bed, sweetheart, Caleb said softly, noticing Lily fighting to keep her eyes open. In her bedroom, as he tucked the blanket around her, Lily asked, Dad, do you think Grandpa Samuel can see us now? Caleb smoothed her hair back, feeling a deep sense of peace settle over him. I think he can, honey, and I think he's finally at rest. He kissed her forehead and walked to the door, pausing to look back at his daughter. The moonlight streaming through her window reminded him of the photo of his father in uniform, young, hopeful, and full of purpose. For the first time in years, Caleb felt truly whole. The anger and confusion that had haunted him since childhood had transformed into understanding and forgiveness. His father, far from abandoning them, had carried his own quiet burden of sacrifice. Just like the wallet Caleb had found in the rain, sometimes the greatest treasures come disguised as lost things, waiting to be discovered by those with the courage to do the right thing. The following evening, Caleb's old pickup truck rumbled down the oak-lined driveway of the Wynn Estate. Spanish moss swayed in the gentle breeze as ancient trees formed a natural tunnel leading to a magnificent antebellum mansion. Lily pressed her face against the passenger window, her eyes wide with wonder. Dad, look at all the flowers, she exclaimed, pointing to the carefully maintained gardens that flanked the driveway. Rows of purple and white hydrangeas bloomed alongside perfectly trimmed hedges. Caleb felt out of place as he parked beside a marble fountain. His work boots and freshly pressed but worn button-down shirt seemed shabby against the grand backdrop of the estate. He helped Lily out of the truck, smoothing down her favorite yellow sundress. Remember your manners, he whispered, though he knew he didn't need to remind her. His daughter had always shown natural grace in any situation. A butler in a crisp uniform opened the heavy wooden door before they could knock. Mr. Morris and Miss Lily, welcome. Mrs. Wynne is expecting you in the conservatory. They followed him through high-ceilinged hallways lined with oil paintings and antique furniture. Lily walked carefully, her small hand still in Caleb's, taking in everything with quiet amazement. The conservatory was a glass-enclosed room that seemed to bring the garden inside. Marjorie stood as they entered, elegant as always in a pale blue dress. Her face lit up at the sight of them. "Caleb, Lily, I'm so glad you could come." She hugged them both, the scent of her subtle perfume reminding Caleb of fresh gardenias. "Please, sit. Dinner will be served shortly." They settled into comfortable wicker chairs surrounded by potted palms and orchids. A small fountain trickled peacefully in one corner. "This is like a fairy tale house," Lily whispered, earning a warm laugh from Marjorie. "Well, every fairy tale needs a princess." Marjorie winked at her. "And speaking of that, I have something for you." She retrieved a small gift bag from a side table and handed it to Lily. Inside was a delicate, silver charm bracelet. Lily gasped with delight as Marjorie helped her fasten it around her wrist. "The butterfly charm is for hope," Marjorie explained, "and the star is for dreams. We can add more charms as you collect more memories." Caleb started to protest that it was too much, but Marjorie held up her hand. "Please, let me have the joy of spoiling her a little." Dinner was served at a small round table in the conservatory. Golden soup, roasted chicken, and vegetables that made even Lily clean her plate. Throughout the meal, Marjorie asked Lily about school and her interests, listening intently to every answer. As they finished dessert, warm apple pie with vanilla ice cream, Marjorie's expression grew more serious. "Caleb, there's something I'd like to discuss with you." She folded her hands on the table. "The memorial service for your father affected me deeply. It made me realize how many veterans like Samuel are out there, struggling alone, carrying burdens we can't." Caleb nodded, thinking of his father living homeless in the same city, too ashamed to reach out. "I've been speaking with my financial advisors," Marjorie continued. "I want to establish a foundation, the Samuel Morris Veterans Foundation. Its mission would be to help homeless veterans rebuild their lives, provide mental health support, and restore their dignity." Lily sat up straighter, her eyes bright with interest. Caleb felt his throat tighten with emotion at the thought of his father's name being used to help others. That's incredibly generous," he managed to say. "There's more," Marjorie said, reaching across to touch his hand. "I want you to be its first director." Caleb blinked in surprise. "Me? But I'm just a mechanic. I don't know anything about running a foundation." "You know what matters most," Marjorie insisted. "You have integrity, compassion, and first-hand understanding of the impact of war on families. Your story, finding that wallet, choosing Lime, honesty over need, discovering your father's truth, it resonates with people. You can connect with donors and veterans in a way that no amount of business experience can match." "I don't know." Caleb shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "It's a huge responsibility." "Dad, you have to do it," Lily burst out, unable to contain herself any longer. "You always tell me we should help people whenever we can. This way you can help lots of people, just like Grandpa wanted to." "You'll have all the support you need," Marjorie assured him. "I'll provide training, staff, everything necessary. What this foundation needs is heart, Caleb, your heart." Caleb looked at his daughter's eager face, then back at Marjorie. Could I have some time to think about it?" "Of course," Marjorie smiled warmly. "Take all the time you need. But there's one more thing. Lily, how would you like to help too?" "Really?" Lily bounced in her seat. "What could I do?" "Well, we'll need someone to organize. Activities for the veterans' children, help with holiday events, maybe start a pen pal program with kids whose parents are deployed." "Oh, please, Dad." Lily clasped her hands together. "Can we do it? Please?" Looking at his daughter's hopeful expression, Caleb felt something shift inside him. Maybe this was what his father's letter had meant about making things right. Maybe this was their chance to help prevent other families from experiencing the same pain they had. "I'll think about it seriously," he promised, and the matching smiles on Lily's and Marjorie's faces warmed his heart. As they walked through the gardens after dinner, fireflies beginning to dance in the twilight, Lily skipped ahead, her new charm bracelet tinkling softly. "You know," Marjorie said quietly, "your father would be proud of the man you've become, Caleb. And he'd be even prouder of what you could do with this foundation." Caleb watched his daughter trying to catch fireflies, her laughter echoing across the manicured lawn. "I'll let you know my decision soon," he said. and for the first time, he felt truly ready to step into a bigger purpose. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Marjorie's temporary office downtown as Caleb sat across from her, studying a draft of the Foundation's mission statement. His worn work boots felt out of place on the polished hardwood floor, but Marjorie's warm smile helped ease his discomfort. "What do you think?" she asked, gesturing to the paper in his hands. Caleb cleared his throat. "It's good, but maybe we could make it simpler? More direct?" He grabbed a pen and started marking the page. Like here, instead of facilitate the procurement of stable housing solutions, we could just say help veterans find homes. Marjorie's eyes lit up. "That's exactly the perspective we need, Caleb. Keep going." As they worked through the document, Caleb found himself growing more confident with each suggestion. His experience living paycheck to paycheck gave him insight into what people really needed. Not fancy words, but real help and understanding. The next day, Caleb stood before the Charleston Rotary Club, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted the borrowed tie Marjorie had insisted he wear. The room was filled with business leaders and community figures, all watching him expectantly. "I'm not used to speaking to crowds," he began, his voice quiet but steady. "I'm just a mechanic who found a wallet." A few chuckles rippled through the audience. "But finding that wallet led me to something else, the truth about my father, a veteran who died alone on these streets." As Caleb shared his story, the tremor in his voice disappeared. He spoke about Samuel's sacrifice, about the letter he'd found, and about the thousands of other veterans who needed help. When he described his own struggles as a single father, several people dabbed at their eyes. "We can't change the past," he concluded, "but we can change the future. With this foundation, we'll make sure no veteran has to die alone and forgotten like my father did." The silence that followed lasted only a moment before the room erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, and Caleb felt his cheeks flush with emotion. Marjorie, watching from the back, beamed with pride. After the speech, a local businessman named Thomas Reed approached them. "I have an empty office space on King Street," he said, pulling out a business card. "It's yours if you want it. No rent for the first year." Caleb started to protest, but Marjorie placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Thank you, Thomas. We'd be honored to accept." That afternoon, Caleb and Lily stood in the empty office space, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Large windows overlooked the historic downtown district, and sunshine streamed across the hardwood floors. "Can I have a desk here too, Dad?" Lily asked, spinning in circles with her arms outstretched. Caleb smiled, watching his daughter's joy. "Maybe we can set up a homework corner for you." As they explored the space, donations started appearing in the Foundation's newly established account. Marjorie's assistant kept sending updates to their phones. $500 from a local church, $2,000 from a retired teacher, a construction company offering to renovate any buildings they acquired for veteran housing. That evening, Caleb sat at their small kitchen table, looking at the stack of papers before him, blueprints for the Foundation's future. His mechanic's coveralls hung on their usual hook, but next to them now was the tie he'd worn to the Rotary Club. "You're going to help a lot of people, Dad," Lily said, bringing him a glass of water. "Just like Mom always said we should." Caleb pulled his daughter into a hug, thinking about how much had changed in just a few days. The constant weight of worry that had pressed down on him for years felt lighter somehow. For the first time since losing his wife, he could see a future that held more than just survival. It held purpose. As he reviewed the day's notes, his phone kept buzzing with new messages. More people wanting to help, more veterans reaching out, more doors opening. The Foundation wasn't just an idea anymore, it was becoming real. And with it, the chance to make his father's story mean something more. Looking at the email from his boss at the garage, Caleb felt a mix of emotions. He'd asked for reduced hours to focus on the Foundation, and his boss had agreed, even offering to spread the word about their cause among his customers. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Caleb stood at their kitchen window, gazing at the stars. The jar of coins still sat on the counter, but it no longer represented desperate hopes. Now it was a reminder of how far they'd come. He thought about his father, about Marjorie's son, about all the veterans who needed help. For years, he'd measured success by whether he could keep the lights on and food on the table. Now, success meant something larger. It meant creating change, helping others, building a legacy that would outlive him. The Foundation wasn't just about honoring his father anymore. It was about transforming pain into purpose. A text message lit up his phone. Another donation, this one from an anonymous veteran who said Samuel's story had given him the courage to seek help. Caleb's vision blurred with tears as he read the message. This was more than just surviving. This was living with meaning. The next morning, as he walked through the empty office space again, Caleb ran his hand along the walls, imagining the possibilities. Desks would go here, a meeting area there, maybe a small kitchen where veterans could gather and share stories. The morning light streamed through the windows, warming the room with promise. The acrid smell of smoke jolted Caleb from his sleep. His eyes snapped open to a room filled with gray haze, the bitter scent burning his nostrils. For a moment, confusion clouded his mind until instinct kicked in. "Lily!" he shouted, throwing off his thin blanket. The space heater in the corner glowed an angry orange, flames licking up the worn wallpaper beside it. He rushed to Lily's room, his heart pounding against his ribs. Smoke had already filled the hallway, making his eyes water. The old wooden floors creaked beneath his feet as he ran. "Daddy?" Lily's frightened voice called out from behind her door. Caleb burst into her room, finding her already sitting up in bed, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Come on, sweetheart, we need to go now." He scooped her up, wrapping her in her comforter. The smoke was thickening rapidly. Caleb could hear the crackle of flames spreading through the walls of their small duplex. He pressed Lily's face into his chest, trying to shield her from the worst of the smoke as they made their way to the front door. The night air hit them like a blessing, cold and clean. Caleb carried Lily across their small yard, setting her down on the sidewalk. Their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, was already outside in her robe, phone pressed to her ear. "I've called 911, she called out. "They're on their way." Caleb nodded, holding Lily close as they watched flames begin to peek through their windows. The old duplex, with its creaky floors and drafty windows, had been their home for 3 years. Now it was being consumed before their eyes. "My backpack," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "All my school stuff." "It's okay, honey," Caleb said, though his own voice shook. "We're okay. That's what matters." Fire trucks arrived within minutes, their sirens piercing the pre-dawn quiet. Red lights painted the street as firefighters rushed to contain the blaze. But Caleb already knew. Everything they owned was inside that house. The few photos he had of Sarah, Lily's mother, the wallet and letters from his father, all of it would be gone. Mrs. Peterson approached them, still in her flowered robe. "You'll stay at the Sunset Motel tonight," she said firmly. "I've already called them. My treat." Caleb started to protest, but she held up her hand. "Don't you dare argue with me, young man. You two need somewhere to sleep." An hour later, they sat in a basic but clean motel room. Lily had finally fallen asleep on one of the twin beds, still wrapped in her smoke-smelling comforter. Caleb sat on the edge of the other bed, staring at his phone. He needed to call Marjorie. The foundation launch was in a week. How could he lead an organization meant to help others when he couldn't even keep a roof over his own daughter's head? The thought of facing her, of admitting his failure, made his stomach twist. With trembling fingers, he dialed her number. Despite the early hour, she answered on the second ring. "Caleb, what's wrong?" He took a shaky breath. There was a fire, the space heater. "We're okay, but the house," his voice cracked. "Everything's gone, Marjorie. All of it." "Oh, my, dear boy," she said softly. "Where are you now?" "Sunset Motel, our neighbor." He swallowed hard. "Listen, I can't do this anymore. The foundation. I can't be what you need me to be. I'm just—" He looked at his soot-stained hands. "I'm just going to be a burden." "Caleb Morris," Marjorie's voice turned stern. "Don't you dare give up now. I'm coming to get you both." "No, please." "We're fine here. I won't hear it. Pack up whatever you have. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Before he could protest further, she hung up. Caleb sat there, phone still in hand, feeling more lost than ever. The sun was beginning to rise outside their window, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed to mock their situation. Lily stirred in her sleep, mumbling something about her stuffed rabbit. Caleb moved to sit beside her, gently stroking her hair. She still smelled of smoke, and the thought made his eyes burn with unshed tears. When Marjorie arrived, she didn't just bring herself. She arrived with bags of emergency supplies, new clothes, toiletries, even a stuffed elephant for Lily. She took one look at Caleb's defeated posture and pulled him into a tight hug. "You listen to me," she whispered fiercely. "This is exactly why we need the foundation. This is why we need you. Because you understand what it means to lose everything and still keep going." Caleb pulled away, shaking his head. I can't lead people when I'm homeless myself. What kind of example is that? The best kind, Marjorie insisted, because you're living proof of what we're fighting for. You think those veterans we want to help haven't been exactly where you are right now? She took his hands in hers, her grip firm and grounding. You and Lily are coming to stay with me, no arguments. We'll figure everything else out together. I can't accept, you can, and you will. Marjorie's voice softened. Caleb, do you know what I see when I look at you? I see my son. The same quiet strength, the same stubborn pride. He would have done exactly what you did. Try to handle everything alone. Don't make his mistake. Caleb felt the weight of her words settle over him. The dawn light now filled the room, illuminating Lily's sleeping form and the few possessions they had left in the world. Everything they owned fit into 2 small grocery bags Marjorie had brought. I don't know how to do this, he admitted quietly. Nobody does, Marjorie replied. That's why we need each other. The morning sun cast long shadows across the charred remains of Caleb's duplex. The acrid smell of burnt wood and melted plastic hung heavy in the air as he stood at the edge of what used to be his front porch. Yellow caution tape fluttered in the breeze, a stark reminder of how quickly life could change. You sure you want to do this now? Officer Martinez asked, clipboard in hand. The fire marshals already completed the investigation. Nothing more you need to see here. Caleb nodded, his voice rough. From smoke and emotion. I need to. There might be something. He couldn't finish the sentence. How could he explain that his father's wallet, the last tangible connection to a man he'd barely known, might still be in there? The officer lifted the tape, and Caleb ducked under it. His work boots crunched on broken glass and debris as he made his way through what remained of his home. The kitchen where he'd made Lily's breakfast was now a blackened skeleton. The couch where they'd watched movies together was reduced to springs and ash. His throat tightened as he reached the spot where the loose floorboard had been. Most of the wooden planks had burned away, leaving only charred joists beneath. Caleb knelt, ignoring the soot that stained his jeans, and began carefully moving debris aside. Please, he whispered, though he wasn't sure who he was talking to. Please, let it be here. His fingers brushed something leather, tucked between 2 floor joists. His heart leaped. The wallet was scorched around the edges, but largely intact. The old handkerchief that had wrapped it had protected it somewhat from the flames. Caleb's hands trembled as he opened it. The army badge was there, tarnished but whole. The old photo of Samuel, young and proud in his uniform, had survived. But as he examined the wallet more closely, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. A slight bulge in the leather, a hidden compartment he'd missed in his initial discovery. With careful fingers, he worked at the stiff leather until it revealed its secret. Another letter, yellowed with age, but preserved within the wallet's folds. The envelope was addressed simply, to Caleb. Read this last. He sank down onto a relatively clean piece of concrete, his back against one of the few remaining wall studs. The paper crackled as he opened it, the ink slightly faded, but still legible. The date at the top was from just 6 months ago. My dear son, he read, his vision blurring slightly. If you're reading this, then you've found my first letter, and I'm no longer here. I've been watching you from afar for so long, seeing you grow into the man you've become. I know about Lily, about Sarah's passing, about your struggles and your strength. Today, I saw you give your last $5 to a stranger whose car had broken down. You didn't know I was there, sitting on the bench across the street, but I saw everything. You remind me so much of your mother. She had that same kindness, that same quiet dignity. I've spent years drowning in shame, convinced that staying away was protecting you from the disgrace I'd brought upon our name. But watching you, seeing the father you've become despite everything life has thrown at you, I realize now that I was wrong. You didn't need protection. You needed a father. The truth is, son, I've never been more proud of anyone in my life than I am of you. Not because of any grand achievements, but because of who you are in the small moments when you think no one is watching. You're everything I wished I could be, everything I failed to be. Don't let my mistakes, my absence, or your pain define you. You're stronger than that. You always have been. Whatever darkness comes your way, remember that you carry within you a light that no shadow can dim. I love you, son. I always have. Caleb's tears fell freely now, dotting the paper. He pressed his palm against his mouth, trying to stifle the sob that rose in his throat, but it broke free anyway. The sound echoed off the burnt walls, raw and honest. Officer Martinez appeared at the edge of the room but said nothing, respectfully stepping back to give Caleb privacy with his grief and revelation. For several long minutes, Caleb sat there, letting years of hurt and anger flow out with his tears. The letter trembled in his hands as he read it again, and then a third time, his father's words sinking deep into his heart. Finally, he carefully folded the letter and tucked it back into the wallet. Standing up, he brushed the ash from his jeans and looked around at the ruins of his home. But somehow, the sight didn't devastate him as it had before. Instead, he felt something new stirring in his chest, something that felt like purpose. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Marjorie's name flashed on the screen, probably calling to check on him after his decision to step away from the foundation. He stared at it for a moment, his father's words echoing in his mind. "Don't let my mistakes, my absence, or your pain define you." Taking a deep breath, Caleb wiped his eyes with his sleeve and reached for his phone. The time for running from responsibility, for letting fear of inadequacy hold him back, was over. His father had watched him from the shadows, seeing strength where Caleb had only seen struggle. Maybe it was time he started seeing it too. The morning sun broke through the clouds, sending shafts of light through the burnt rafters above. In the midst of destruction, Caleb felt something he hadn't expected to find in these ashes: hope. Not just for himself, but for all the other forgotten heroes out there, all the other broken families who needed someone to believe in them. He looked down at the wallet in his hands, running his thumb over the worn leather. "Thank you, Dad," he whispered, and for the first time in his life, he truly meant it. The afternoon sun filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Michael's Church as Caleb sat in Reverend Thompson's office, his hands wrapped around a warm cup of coffee. The small room felt safe, a stark contrast to the chaos of the past 24 hours. "The guest house is yours for as long as you need it," Reverend Thompson said, sliding a key across his desk. "It's not fancy, but it's clean and warm." Caleb's throat tightened. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," the Reverend smiled. "That's what community is for." Outside in the church garden, Lily sat on a wooden bench, writing in a brand new purple notebook someone had given her. Her backpack, also new, was stuffed with school supplies donated by local teachers. She looked up as Caleb approached, her eyes bright despite everything they'd been through. "Dad, look what Mrs. Peterson brought." She held up the notebook. "I'm writing everything down, like Mom used to do in her journals, our whole story." Caleb's heart swelled. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." His phone buzzed. Another text from Marjorie. She'd been trying to reach him since his emotional retreat the night before. Taking a deep breath, he dialed her number. "Caleb?" Marjorie answered immediately. "I've been so worried." "I'm sorry about yesterday," he said, watching Lily return to her writing. "I wasn't thinking straight. You had just lost your home. No one expects you to think straight." Her voice softened. "Will you come see me? There's something we need to discuss." An hour later, Caleb sat in Marjorie's elegant study. Newspaper clippings about? Samuel's memorial service covered her desk, along with foundation, paperwork, and dozens of letters. "These arrived just this morning," Marjorie said, gesturing to the letters. "All from people touched by your story, veterans, single parents, people who've lost their way and found hope in what you're doing." She picked up one envelope. "This one's from a Marine who's been living in his car. He said your father's story made him finally seek help at the VA." Another letter. "This mother works 3 jobs to support her kids. She said your honesty in returning my wallet restored her faith in humanity." Caleb's hands trembled as he picked up a letter. The words blurred before his eyes. "I know you feel overwhelmed," Marjorie continued. "You think you're not qualified to lead this foundation. But Caleb, your qualification is your heart, your story, your understanding of struggle and dignity and hope." She reached across the desk and took his hand. "When I lost my wallet that day, I was ready to give up on my philanthropic work. I felt too old, too disconnected from real people. But meeting you and Lily," her eyes misted. "You reminded me why I started in the first place." A knock at the door interrupted them. Marjorie's assistant entered with a tablet. "Ma'am, you need to see this." On the screen was a local news website. Dozens of comments filled the section under an article about the fire. People offering furniture, clothes, jobs, a local real estate agent volunteering to help find affordable housing, a car dealership offering a reliable used car at cost. "The community wants to help," Marjorie said softly. not because they pity you, but because you've inspired them. Every act of kindness you've shown, returning my wallet, honoring your father, sharing your story, it's created ripples you can't even see. Caleb thought of Samuel's letters, of his father watching from afar, too ashamed to come home. He thought of Lily, turning their journey into stories, finding meaning in their struggles. "Okay," he said quietly, then stronger. "Okay, I'll do it. I'll lead the foundation." Marjorie's face lit up. "You won't regret this." That evening, Caleb and Lily moved into the church's guest house. It was small but cozy, with 2 bedrooms and a tiny kitchen. Church members had already stocked the pantry and filled the closets with donated clothes. Lily sat cross-legged on her new bed, still writing in her purple notebook. "Dad, can I read you what I wrote?" "Of course." She cleared her throat. Once there was a dad who worked really hard to take care of his daughter. He didn't have much money, but he had a lot of love. Then one day, he found a wallet in the rain. Caleb listened, amazed at how she captured their story. The wallet, meeting Marjorie, discovering Samuel's history, the fire. She wrote about the kindness of strangers and the power of truth. In her 10-year-old words, their struggles became a tale of hope. "That's beautiful," he said when she finished. "Your mom would love it." "I'm going to keep writing," Lily said. "Mrs. Peterson says real writers never stop telling stories that matter." As Caleb tucked her in that night, his phone chimed with more messages. Job offers from 3 local businesses, a furniture store offering to furnish their next home, a veterans group asking him to speak at their next meeting. He sat on the small porch, looking up at the stars. For so long, he'd carried his burdens alone, thinking independence meant silence. But here, in the aftermath of losing everything, he was finding something precious. The strength of community, the healing power of shared stories, the grace of accepting help. Tomorrow, he would begin his work with the foundation. He would tell his father's story, help other veterans find their way home, show his daughter that one person's honesty could spark a chain of kindness that touched countless lives. For now, though, he just sat in the quiet night, feeling gratitude wash over him like a gentle rain. In his pocket, Samuel's last letter pressed against his heart, a reminder that sometimes the greatest gifts come after the deepest losses. The grand ballroom of the Charleston Heritage Hotel sparkled with elegant chandeliers and fresh flowers. Caleb tugged at his new suit collar, still not used to wearing anything fancier than his mechanic's uniform. He watched from behind heavy velvet curtains as the room filled with people, local business leaders, veterans in dress uniforms, and community members who had supported the foundation. "You're going to do great, Dad," Lily whispered, squeezing his hand. She wore a powder blue dress that Marjorie had helped pick out, her hair neatly braided. "Just tell them what's in your heart, like you told me." Caleb smiled down at his daughter, amazed at her wisdom. These past few weeks had transformed their lives in ways he never could have imagined. The guest house at Street Michael's had become a cozy temporary home filled with donated furniture and countless care packages from strangers who'd heard their story. "5 minutes, Mr. Morris," a young event coordinator said, clipboard in hand. Marjorie appeared beside them in an elegant navy dress, her silver hair perfectly styled. "Everything is ready, Caleb. Frank just arrived. They're settling him near the front." Caleb peered through the curtain again. Sure enough, Frank Maddox was being wheeled to a reserved spot, looking distinguished in his military dress uniform despite his age. The medals on his chest caught the light. The room hushed as the local news cameras started rolling. Marjorie stepped out first, walking confidently to the podium. "Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the official launch of the Samuel Morris Foundation." Caleb's heart pounded as he listened to her introduction. Just 6 weeks ago, he'd been counting coins in a jar, wondering how to afford Lily's school supplies. Now, here he stood, about to address hundreds of people who believed in his vision to help homeless veterans. And now, I'd like to introduce you to our executive director, a man whose simple act of honesty sparked a chain of events that brought us all here tonight, Caleb Morris. The applause felt surreal as Caleb walked onto the stage. He placed his notes on the podium but didn't look at them. Instead, his eyes found Lily's encouraging smile, then Frank's weathered face, and finally swept across the sea of expectant faces. 3 months ago, he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I found a wallet in a rainstorm. That moment could have changed my life in 2 very different ways. But I didn't know then that the real treasure wasn't the money inside that wallet. It was the truth it would lead me to find. The room grew perfectly still as Caleb shared his journey. He spoke about his father's hidden sacrifice, about Frank's courage in revealing the truth, and about the second chances that life sometimes offers when you least expect them. My father lived in the shadows of this city for years, Caleb continued, his voice thick with emotion. He carried shame that wasn't his to bear and pride that kept him from reaching out. How many other heroes are out there right now, sleeping in doorways or under bridges, carrying similar burdens? How many need just one person to believe in them, to help them find their way back? In the audience, several veterans nodded, some wiping away tears. Frank sat straighter in his wheelchair, his chin held high. This foundation isn't just about providing shelter or meals, though we'll do that too. It's about restoring dignity. It's about helping people who served our country find their way home, not just to a building, but to themselves, to their families, to hope. The applause that followed was thunderous. Marjorie returned to the podium, placing a gentle hand on Caleb's shoulder. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm thrilled to announce that thanks to your generous support and matching funds from the Wynn Family Trust, the Samuel Morris Foundation has already raised. She paused for effect. $125,000. The room erupted in cheers. Lily bounced up and down in her seat, clapping wildly. Caleb felt his eyes well up as he watched Frank receive a standing ovation when Marjorie acknowledged him as a special guest. As the formal program transitioned into dinner and dancing, Caleb made his way through the crowd, accepting handshakes and words of encouragement. He watched as Lily joined a group of other children, the sons and daughters of board members and donors, on the dance floor. They twirled and laughed to the music without a care in the world. "She's something special, that girl of yours," Frank said as Caleb stopped by his table. "Samuel will be proud of both of you. Thank you, Frank, for everything." The elderly veteran reached for Caleb's hand. "You've given an old soldier's story meaning, son. That's worth more than all the medals in the world." Caleb found a quiet moment to stand at the edge of the ballroom, taking in the scene before him. Lily danced with her new friends, her face glowing with joy. Marjorie moved from table to table, elegant and gracious, while business people and community leaders discussed plans for the foundation's future. Local news cameras captured it all, ensuring their message would reach even more people who needed to hear it. The weight of the moment hit him all at once. The incredible journey from that rainy day in the parking lot to this glittering evening. He thought of the coin jar at home, no longer needed, of his father's hidden wallet, now safely preserved in a display case that would stand in the foundation's office, of second chances, and how sometimes the biggest ones come disguised as simple choices. The Washington Convention Center hummed with anticipation. Hundreds of veterans in their dress uniforms filled the auditorium, medals gleaming under the bright lights. Caleb sat in the front row, his hands wrapped tightly around the worn leather wallet that had changed everything. Lily, wearing her best blue dress, squeezed his arm reassuringly. "You okay, Dad?" she whispered. Caleb managed a shaky nod. The weight of the moment pressed down on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. Just 6 months ago, he'd been counting coins in a jar to buy his daughter's school supplies. Now here he was, about to address some of the nation's highest-ranking military officials. General Matthews, a decorated commander with silver hair and kind eyes, stepped up to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker has an extraordinary story to share." His journey began with a simple act of honesty and led to the discovery of a long-buried truth about his father, Private First Class Samuel Morris. Caleb's chest tightened at the mention of his father's name. He felt Marjorie's gentle touch on his shoulder from the seat behind him. She'd flown in specially for this event, refusing to miss what she called a moment of justice. The general continued, "Please welcome Mr. Caleb Morris, director of the Samuel Morris Foundation for Homeless Veterans." The applause thundered through the room as Caleb rose. His legs felt wobbly as he made his way to the podium, clutching his father's wallet like a lifeline. The faces before him blurred slightly, but he focused on Lily's encouraging smile in the front row. "Thank you," he began, his voice surprisingly steady. "I never knew my father growing up. All I had was a handful of memories and the bitter taste of what I thought was abandonment." He pulled out the wallet, holding it up. But this wallet, found hidden beneath a floorboard in our old house, told a different story. The room fell silent as Caleb shared the details of his discovery, the letters, the photo, the truth about his father's sacrifice. His voice cracked when he described Frank Maddox's revelation about Samuel, taking the fall for another soldier. "My father chose honor over recognition," Caleb continued. He chose to protect another man's family at the cost of his own reputation. And then, too ashamed to face us with what he saw as his failure, he watched over us from a distance, homeless but never far away. In the audience, several older veterans wiped their eyes. A colonel in the front row nodded slowly, his face grave with understanding. The Samuel Morse Foundation has helped over 50 homeless veterans find housing in just our first 6 months, Caleb said. Each time we help someone, I see my father's face. I see the man who thought he wasn't worthy of coming home, the hero who died before he could hear his name cleared. General Matthews returned to the podium, standing beside Caleb. Mr. Morris, your father's case has been thoroughly reviewed by a military panel. He gestured to a group of officers seated at a table to the side. Based on new evidence and testimony, including statements from Frank Maddox and others who served with Private First Class Morris, we have made a decision. The general lifted a formal document. By order of the Department of Defense, Samuel Morris's dishonorable discharge has been expunged from his record. His service status has been upgraded to honorable discharge. Caleb's vision blurred with tears. Lily rushed forward to hold his hand as the general continued. Furthermore, for his actions in saving 5 fellow soldiers during the Battle of Khe Sanh, and for displaying exceptional courage and sacrifice in the face of danger, Private First Class Samuel Morris is posthumously awarded the Silver Star. A young lieutenant stepped forward carrying a velvet box. Inside gleamed the silver medal, its surface catching the light. General Matthews lifted it carefully. Mr. Morris, on behalf of a grateful nation, I present this medal to you and your family. Your father's sacrifice will no longer go unrecognized. Caleb's hand shook as he accepted the medal. Tears flowed freely down his cheeks as he stared at the symbol of his father's courage. The audience rose in a standing ovation, but Caleb barely heard them. In his mind, he saw his father, not the broken man who had hidden in the shadows, but the brave soldier who had chosen honor above all else. Thank you, Dad, he whispered, clutching both the medal and the wallet to his chest. Lily wrapped her arms around him, her own tears soaking into his suit jacket. From her seat, Marjorie dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Frank Maddox, who had insisted on attending despite his failing health, wheeled himself forward. His weathered hand reached out to touch the medal. Sam would be proud, son, he said hoarsely. Not just of this, but of you. Of everything you've done in his name. The general gestured for Caleb to face the audience. Camera flashes popped as he held up the medal, his father's wallet still gripped tightly in his other hand. The two objects, one, representing the truth finally revealed, the other, the honor finally bestowed, felt like pieces of his father's legacy finally coming together. As he stood there, surrounded by the respect and admiration of hundreds of veterans, Caleb felt a lifetime of questions and pain begin to heal. His father had never truly abandoned them. He had been protecting others until the very end, carrying his shame like a cross, rather than revealing the truth that would have cleared his name. Looking out at the sea of uniforms, Caleb saw countless other stories waiting to be told. Other veterans who might be suffering in silence, like his father had. The Foundation's work was more important than ever. Samuel Morris's story would help light the way for others to find their way home. The morning sun painted golden stripes across the driveway as Caleb and Lily stood hand in hand, staring at their new home. It wasn't fancy, a simple 2-story house with white siding and navy blue shutters, but to them, it was perfect. A small flower garden bloomed beneath the front windows, and a sturdy maple tree provided shade over the neat front lawn. Is it really ours, Dad? Lily squeezed his hand, her voice barely above a whisper. Caleb pulled the house key from his pocket, a simple brass key attached to a wooden keychain that Lily had made at school, decorated with painted hearts. It sure is, sweetheart. They walked up the concrete path together, their footsteps echoing in the quiet morning air. The front porch creaked softly under their feet, not the worrying creak of their old duplex, but the welcoming sound of solid wood that had aged well. Caleb's hand trembled slightly as he fitted the key into the lock. The door swung open, revealing a home that took his breath away. The foundation board and donors had outdone themselves. Warm sunlight streamed through pristine windows, illuminating hardwood floors that gleamed with care. The living room welcomed them with comfortable furniture. A plush sectional sofa in warm brown, 2 matching armchairs, and soft throw pillows in shades of blue and green. Lily darted inside, her sneakers squeaking against the floor. Dad, look at everything! He followed her, taking in the details that made the house feel like a home. Family photos they'd managed to save from the fire had been professionally framed and arranged on the walls. There were even new pictures, moments from the foundation's launch, the memorial service for his father, and candid shots of him and Lily at various events. The kitchen sparkled with new appliances, but it wasn't cold or showroom perfect. A cookie jar shaped like a smiling cat sat on the counter, and cheerful dish towels hung from the oven handle. The cabinets were stocked with groceries, and a note on the refrigerator read, "Welcome home. Love, Marjorie, and the Foundation family." "Dad?" Lily called from upstairs. "Come see my room." He climbed the stairs, running his hand along the stairs. Smooth banister. Lily stood in the doorway of what would be her bedroom, practically bouncing with excitement. The room was empty except for a bed, dresser, and desk, but that was the point. Marjorie had insisted Lily should choose her own paint color and decorations. "What color are you thinking, kiddo?" Caleb asked, watching as she spun in circles with her arms outstretched. "Purple," she declared. "Light purple, like the flowers in Mom's garden." Her voice softened at the mention of her mother, but her smile remained bright. They explored the rest of the house together, finding new surprises in every room. The master bedroom had a comfortable queen-size bed with crisp sheets and a handmade quilt. The bathroom was stocked with fresh towels and all the necessities. Even the laundry room was ready, with a new washer and dryer humming quietly as they passed. But it was the living room that drew them back. Above the stone fireplace, a custom-built wooden mantel held the items that meant the most. In the center, Samuel's medal gleamed in a specially designed display case. Next to it, the black and white photograph of the young soldier, Caleb's father, smiled out at them, his eyes kind and determined. A bronze plaque completed the arrangement, its words simple but powerful, "Never forgotten." Caleb stood before the display, emotion tightening his throat. He reached out and touched the plaque gently, tracing the letters with his fingertips. "Grandpa's watching over us now," Lily said softly, slipping her hand into his. "Yeah, he is." Caleb pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "How about we break in that fireplace? I saw some hot chocolate in the kitchen." While Lily arranged cushions on the floor, Caleb built a fire, grateful for the perfectly stacked firewood on the back porch. Soon, flames danced behind the glass doors, casting a warm glow across the room. He made hot chocolate in their new kitchen, adding extra marshmallows to Lily's mug, just the way she liked it. They settled on the cushions in front of the fire, Lily leaning against his side. The house creaked and settled around them, but unlike their old place, these sounds were comforting rather than concerning. Through the windows, they could see the sky turning pink with sunset. "Dad?" Lily blew on her hot chocolate, creating ripples in the marshmallow-dotted surface. Is this what home is supposed to feel like?" Caleb looked down at his daughter, her face glowing in the firelight. He thought about all they'd been through, the struggles, the loss, the unexpected turns their life had taken. But here they were, safe and warm, with Samuel's memory watching over them and a future full of possibility ahead. "Yeah, sweetheart," he said softly. "This is exactly what home is supposed to feel like." Lily nodded, satisfied, and snuggled closer. The fire crackled softly, and outside, a light breeze rustled through the maple tree's leaves. For the first time in 10 years, they both felt the deep, settling peace that comes with being truly home. The kitchen filled with the sweet aroma of vanilla and cinnamon as Marjorie guided Lily's small hands in kneading cookie dough. Flour dusted their aprons and spotted their cheeks, making them look like they'd been caught in a tiny snowstorm. "The secret," Marjorie said, her elegant voice warm with affection, "is to fold the dough gently, like you're tucking it into bed." She demonstrated with practiced movements while Lily watched intently. "Like this, Grandma Margie?" Lily asked, mimicking the motion. The nickname that had started spreading through their community now fell naturally from her lips. "Perfect, sweetheart," Marjorie beamed, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "You're a natural, just like my Tommy was." From his spot at the kitchen table, Caleb looked up from his foundation paperwork. He watched as Marjorie's expression softened at the mention of her son. These moments had become more frequent over the past few weeks, gentle references to Tommy that no longer carried the sharp edge of grief they once had. "Did Tommy like to bake too?" Lily asked, reaching for the cookie cutters. "Oh, yes," Marjorie laughed, pulling out a worn recipe card from her apron pocket. This snickerdoodle recipe was his favorite. He'd sit right where you are now, covered in just as much flour, begging to lick the spoon. Lily giggled. leaving floury fingerprints on the granite countertop as she carefully pressed star-shaped cutters into the dough. Did he make them for you when he grew up? A shadow flickered across Marjorie's face, but her smile remained gentle. He tried, whenever he came home on leave, though they were never quite as pretty as these ones were making. Caleb set down his pen, watching the scene before him. These Sunday baking sessions had become a cherished ritual over the past month. What started as occasional visits from Marjorie had evolved into regular weekend gatherings filled with stories, laughter, and the kind of comfortable silence that only exists between family. "Dad, look!" Lily held up a perfectly shaped cookie. "This one's for you." "It looks delicious, sweetie," Caleb said, standing to inspect their handiwork. The kitchen counter was lined with neat rows of stars and hearts waiting to go into the oven. Marjorie touched his arm lightly. "Caleb, dear, would you fetch that box from my car, the one I mentioned earlier?" He nodded, heading outside to her elegant silver sedan. The box she'd mentioned sat in the back seat, an old wooden chest with brass fittings that had seen better days. When he returned, Marjorie was helping Lily slide the first batch of cookies into the oven. "I've been meaning to share these," Marjorie said, wiping her hands on her apron before opening the chest. Inside were photo albums, their covers worn but well preserved. "I thought you both might like to see some pictures of Tommy." They gathered around the Bacca kitchen table, cookies forgotten for the moment. Marjorie opened the first album, revealing photos of a young boy with his mother's elegant features and a mischievous grin. "That's Tommy on his 10th birthday," she said, touching the photograph gently. "The same age as you, Lily." Page after page, Tommy grew up before their eyes, learning to ride a bike, graduating high school, proudly wearing his military uniform. Lily asked questions about each photo, and Marjorie answered them all, her voice growing stronger with each story shared. "I haven't looked at these in years," she admitted, closing the last album. It hurt too much, but now she reached for Lily's hand. Now it feels right to share them with family. The timer dinged, and Lily jumped up to check on the cookies. Caleb stayed at the table with Marjorie, who was still looking at the closed album. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything you've done for us, for sharing Tommy with us." Marjorie looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Oh, Caleb, you and Lily have given me so much more than I could ever give you. When I lost Tommy, I lost my purpose. I threw myself into charity work, into foundation after foundation, but nothing filled that void." She patted his hand. "But helping you, watching Lily grow, being Grandma Margie, it's helped me remember what it feels like to be part of a family again." The smell of perfectly baked cookies filled the kitchen as Lily carefully removed the tray from the oven, her tongue poking out in concentration. "They're ready," she announced proudly. "Just like Tommy's," Marjorie said, wiping her eyes with a laugh, though hopefully not quite as burned around the edges as his usually were. They spent the rest of the afternoon sharing cookies and more stories. Marjorie taught Lily how to make proper English tea, something she'd learned from her own grandmother. The autumn sun slowly sank toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the kitchen floor. As evening approached, neighbors dropped by, something that had become common since they'd moved in. Mrs. Chen from next door brought over a casserole, and Mr. Peterson from across the street stopped to chat about the Foundation's latest veteran outreach program. Each of them greeted Marjorie as Grandma Margie without hesitation, making her smile grow wider each time. When the last cookie had been eaten and the kitchen cleaned, Lily hugged Marjorie tightly. "Will you come over next weekend too? You promised to teach me how to make Tommy's favorite chocolate cake." "Of course, sweetheart." Marjorie kissed the top of her head. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." Caleb walked Marjorie to her car, carrying the now empty wooden chest. The evening air was cool and crisp, filled with the promise of autumn. "You know," Marjorie said, turning to face him, "I used to pray for a sign that Tommy's death had some greater purpose, that all that pain meant something." She looked back at the fawn house, where Lily waved from the window. "I never expected the answer to come in the form of a lost wallet and a good man's honesty." Caleb felt his throat tighten with emotion. "We're the lucky ones, Marjorie. You've given us more than just support. You've given us family." "That's exactly what we are," she agreed, pulling him into a warm embrace. Family. As Marjorie's car pulled away, Caleb stood in the driveway for a moment, watching until her taillights disappeared around the corner. Inside, the house smelled of cookies and love, of new beginnings and healing hearts. He could hear Lily humming in the kitchen, probably sneaking one last cookie before bed. In the living room, Tommy's photos now sat alongside Samuel's medal and the plaque that read, "Never Forgotten." Different stories, different paths, but all part of the tapestry that had brought them together. The home that had started as a gift from donors had become something more, a place where broken hearts found healing, where new memories layered over old grief, where family meant more than just blood. Caleb sat at his new desk in the foundation's office, reviewing donation reports when his phone buzzed. An unfamiliar local number flashed across the screen. He hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Hello, is this Caleb Morris?" A young voice crackled through the speaker. "Yes, this is he. Sir, my name's Tommy Parker. The caller paused, seeming nervous. "I found a wallet outside the movie theater last night. There's about $600 inside." Caleb sat up straighter, memories of that rainy day and Marjorie's wallet flooding back. "I saw your story on the news a while back," Tommy continued, "about finding that rich lady's wallet and how it changed everything. I was actually going to keep this one I found, but..." His voice grew quieter. "I couldn't stop thinking about what you said in that speech, about how one honest choice can change more lives than just your own." Warmth spread through Caleb's chest. He grabbed a pen and notepad. "That's really good of you, Tommy. Have you contacted the police?" "Not yet. I found the owner's ID, but I wanted to call you first. Maybe sounds stupid, but..." Tommy cleared his throat. "Your story helped me make the right choice. I'm working 2 jobs to help my mom with rent, and $600 would have made a big difference. But I kept thinking about how you were struggling too, and you still did the right thing." Caleb's eyes grew misty. He thought of all those nights counting coins in jars, the missed meals, the constant worry. "It doesn't sound stupid at all, Tommy. Actually, it means a lot to hear that." They talked for a few more minutes. Caleb gave Tommy some advice about contacting the police and offered to help if he needed anything. After hanging up, he sat back in his chair, stunned by how life had come full circle. Without thinking twice, he pulled up his social media account, something he'd gotten better at using since the foundation launched. His fingers moved across the keyboard. "Just received the most incredible call. A young man named Tommy found a wallet and decided to return it, saying our story inspired his choice. To Tommy, your honesty matters. Your character matters. You've inspired ME today. Number pay it forward, number honesty." He hit post and went back to his work. An hour later, his phone started buzzing nonstop. The post was going viral. Local news stations were sharing it. People began commenting with their own stories of honest choices they'd made, inspired by his original story. Marjorie called next. "Caleb, have you seen what's happening online? Your post is everywhere." He refreshed his screen and watched the numbers climb. "I can't believe it. All these people. This is exactly why we started the foundation," Marjorie said, her voice warm with pride. "One honest choice creates ripples. Those ripples become waves." As if on cue, his email pinged. It was from Lily's school principal, Mrs. Henderson. "Dear Mr. President Morris, I've been following your inspiring journey since the wallet incident last year, and today's viral post about Tommy reminded me why we need more stories like yours shared with our students. Would you consider being our keynote speaker for Career Day next month? Our children could benefit greatly from hearing about character, choices, and how one honest decision can change a life. Best regards, Patricia Henderson." Caleb read the email twice. Public speaking still made him nervous, but he thought about Tommy's call, about all the comments online, about Lily's proud face whenever she told people about her dad's work at the foundation. He typed a quick reply, "I would be honored." That evening, as Caleb helped Lily with her homework at their kitchen table, he told her about Tommy and the school invitation. Her eyes lit up. "You're going to speak at my school? Can I help tell the story about the wallet and about Grandma Margie?" "Grandma? Margie?" Caleb chuckled. The nickname had stuck ever since Marjorie started spending weekends with them, teaching Lily to bake and sharing stories about her own life. "Yeah, and maybe about finding Grandpa Samuel's wallet too?" Lily's voice softened at the mention of the grandfather she never met. She often sat by the fireplace mantel, studying his medal and photo. "We'll see, sweetheart." Caleb reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "First, let's finish this math homework." Later that night, after tucking Lily in, Caleb checked his phone one last time. Tommy's wallet had been successfully returned to its owner, an elderly man who'd been devastated at losing his pension money. The man was so moved by Tommy's honesty that he insisted on giving him a reward. The comments continued pouring in. Found a phone last week and remembered Caleb's story. Tracked down the owner instead of keeping it. Number, pay it forward. My son was inspired by the Morris story to return money he found at 20. School, proud mom moment. From one wallet to another, the ripple effect of honesty is real. Thank you, Caleb Morris. Caleb's vision blurred with tears as he scrolled through the messages. He thought about that rainy day when he found Marjorie's wallet, how close he'd come to making a different choice. He thought about his father's wallet, hidden beneath the floorboards of their old home, waiting years to tell its story. He walked to the mantel and picked up his father's medal, running his thumb over its surface. "You wouldn't believe it, Dad," he whispered. "Your story, my story, they're helping people choose right over easy. They're helping people find their way home." His phone buzzed one more time, a text from Tommy. "Mr. Morris, the owner gave me a reward. I'd like to donate it to your foundation to help another veteran find their way home. Is that okay?" Caleb smiled through his tears and typed back, "More than okay, Tommy. Welcome to the family." The autumn breeze carried the scent of freshly turned earth across the 10-acre plot on the outskirts of Charleston. Rows of white folding chairs faced a small stage decorated with red, white, and blue bunting. Behind it stood the foundation's new sign, Samuel Morris Veterans Village, where heroes find home. Caleb adjusted his tie, still not quite used to wearing one. From the makeshift parking area, cars continued to arrive, filling the grassy field with a mix of luxury vehicles and modest sedans. He watched as Lily, wearing a yellow sundress, helped Marjorie arrange programs on each chair. His daughter had grown so much in these past months, not just in height, but in confidence and purpose. "Everything's ready, Dad," Lily called out, waving a handful of programs. Marjorie smoothed her elegant navy blazer and walked over to Caleb. "The landscapers marked the perfect spot for the tree," she said, pointing to a small flag near the future community center's location. "A live oak, it'll be here for God. Generations." The sapling waited in its container nearby, its young leaves dancing in the breeze. Caleb touched the rough bark, remembering how his father once told him stories about climbing oak trees as a boy. Now, Samuel's legacy would grow with this one. People began filling the chairs, local business leaders in press suits, veterans in their service caps, volunteers in foundation t-shirts, and families from the neighborhood. Frank Maddox's daughter wheeled him to the front row, his medals glinting in the morning sun. At precisely 10 o'clock, Caleb stepped up to the podium. Camera flashes sparkled across the crowd. He pulled his father's worn wallet from his pocket and held it up. "A year ago, I found a different wallet in a rainy parking lot," he began, his voice carrying across the hushed audience. "That moment of choice, to do the right thing, led to changes I never could have imagined. But it was finding this wallet," he held up his father's, "that showed me how loss can transform into hope." The crowd listened intently as he described the village's features: transitional housing units, a community center, counseling offices, job training facilities, and gardens where veterans could grow their own food. "But more than buildings," he continued, "we're growing something else here today. Roots. Roots of community. Roots of healing." Lily and Marjorie joined him on stage. Together, they walked to the designated spot for the oak tree. A shovel with a ceremonial golden blade waited, its handle polished to a shine. "This tree," Caleb announced, "represents every veteran who will find their way here. Like them, it might seem fragile at first, but with support and care, it will grow strong." He looked at Frank in the front row. "And like the men and women it honors, it will shelter others for generations to come." The three of them took turns with the shovel, first Caleb, then Marjorie, and finally Lily. The hole grew deeper with each turn of earth. Volunteers brought the young oak forward, and together they lowered it into place. As they patted the soil around its base, someone in the crowd began to sing "God Bless America." Others joined in, the melody swelling across the field. Caleb noticed several veterans wiping their eyes. A retired Marine Corps sergeant stepped forward with a watering can. "Permission to help this soldier grow, sir?" he asked with a slight smile. Caleb nodded, throat tight with emotion. One by one, veterans came forward to add water to the tree's roots. Each had their own story. Some spoke softly to the sapling, others stood in silent salute. A Vietnam vet in a wheelchair placed a small American flag next to it. Marjorie squeezed Caleb's hand. "Samuel would be so proud," she whispered. "Look at what his story has started." Lily hugged her father's waist. Can we come check on it every week? She asked. I want to watch it grow. After the ceremony, people lingered to examine the building plans displayed on easels. Veterans shared stories over coffee and donuts. Children ran playing between the chairs while their parents talked about volunteering opportunities. Caleb stood back, watching it all. A young veteran approached him, cap in hand. Sir, he said hesitantly, I've been living in my car for 3 months. When do you think this place might be ready? Construction starts next week, Caleb replied warmly. But we've got temporary arrangements we can help with right now. Come to my office tomorrow? The man's eyes filled with tears. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. As the crowd gradually dispersed, Caleb, Lily, and Marjorie remained by the oak tree. Its leaves cast delicate shadows on the ground, dancing in patterns that reminded Caleb of the shadows his father's absence had left on his life. But now those shadows were transforming into something beautiful. Look, Lily pointed excitedly. A bird already found it. Sure enough, a cardinal had landed on one of the slender branches. It tilted its bright red head as if inspecting their handiwork, then flew off toward the future community center's location. That's a good sign, Marjorie said, smiling. New life already making itself at home. They stood together, watching the young oak's leaves shimmer in the sunlight, its roots already reaching deep into Charleston soil, ready to grow strong and tall, just like the hope it represented. A gentle spring breeze drifted through the open windows of Caleb's office at the Samuel Morse Foundation. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across his desk, where a tablet displayed the latest article from the Washington Post. His fingers traced the headline, Struggling Single Dad Return Wallet Ends Up Leading National Veteran Movement. Ready to hear it? Caleb asked Lily, who sat cross-legged on the leather couch they'd added to make the office more homey. She nodded eagerly, hugging a worn stuffed rabbit to her chest. Caleb cleared his throat and began reading. 6 months ago, Caleb Morris was counting coins to feed his daughter. Today, he leads one of the fastest-growing veterans support organizations in the Southeast. The transformation began with a simple act of honesty, returning a lost wallet containing $10,000 to philanthropist Marjorie Wynn. He paused, glancing at Lily's proud smile, then continued. But the real story wasn't about the money. It was about a father and daughter who had lost everything except their integrity, and how that integrity sparked a movement that would change hundreds of lives. The article detailed the foundation's achievements: 30 veterans housed, 15 reunited with their families, and dozens more receiving medical care and job training. There were quotes from Frank Maddox about Samuel's heroism, and comments from veterans who'd found hope through the program. The Samuel Morse Foundation isn't just about housing, Caleb read, his voice growing thick. It's about redemption. Every veteran who walks through our doors carries their own story of loss, sacrifice, and sometimes shame. We show them that their story isn't over. Lily moved to perch on the arm of his chair, leaning against his shoulder. That's beautiful, Dad. He squeezed her hand and continued reading. Morris's own journey of reconciliation with his father's memory has become a cornerstone of the Foundation's mission. My father lived and died believing he wasn't worthy of coming home, Morris explains. Now we make sure no veteran feels that way again. The article went on to describe Marjorie's role as mentor and benefactor, quoting her saying, Sometimes the greatest acts of courage happen in quiet moments, like a struggling father choosing honesty over necessity. When Caleb finished reading, Lily wrapped her arms around his neck. Mom would be so proud of us, she whispered. Yeah, baby, I think she would. They sat in comfortable silence until Marjorie appeared in the doorway, elegant, as always, in her cream-colored blazer. I thought I might find you two here. The porch swing at home is calling, and I brought fresh lemonade. The drive to their new house took only 10 minutes. The modest 2-story home sat on a quiet street lined with oak trees, their branches creating a natural canopy overhead. The wide front porch had become their favorite gathering spot, especially in the evenings. Marjorie settled into one of the rocking chairs while Caleb and Lily took the porch swing. The ice clinked softly in their glasses as they watched the sun begin its descent. I saw the article, Marjorie said, her voice warm with pride. They captured the heart of what we're doing here. Caleb nodded, watching a pair of cardinals flit between the trees. Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed. A year ago, I was terrified about how I'd keep the lights on. Now you're changing lives, Marjorie finished, and letting others help change yours. The evening air grew, cooler as they talked and laughed, sharing stories about the Foundation's latest successes and Lily's upcoming school play. Marjorie told them about the new veteran housing complex breaking ground next month, and Lily excitedly described the volunteer program she was starting at her school to write letters to deployed service members. As night fell, the stars began to appear, twinkling through the oak branches. Lily's head grew heavy against Caleb's shoulder, her breathing becoming slow and steady. The weight of her trust, her innocence, still amazed him after all these years. Marjorie rose quietly, gathering the empty glasses. "I should head home. Board meeting tomorrow at 9. Caleb nodded, careful not to disturb Lily. "Thank you," he said softly, meaning far more than just the lemonade. "Family takes care of family," Marjorie replied simply, touching his shoulder as she passed. After she left, Caleb sat in the growing darkness, holding his sleeping daughter. He thought about Samuel's wallet, still displayed in his office alongside the medal. He thought about the old duplex, the countless nights of worry, the fire that had seemed like the end of everything but had somehow become a beginning. Looking down at Lily's peaceful face, feeling the solid foundation of the house behind him and the certainty of tomorrow before him, Caleb smiled softly. "We're going to be just fine," he whispered. The stars twinkled their agreement as a warm breeze rustled the oak leaves, carrying away the last echoes of uncertainty and bringing the sweet promise of all the good yet to come. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Caleb Morris, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.